Looks like we are recording. So we just opened the FinCom meeting, 7:01 p.m. By taking part in the meeting, you agree to be recorded and all of the notes and details around being recorded. Okay. Agenda today, so we'll do a quick review of previous meeting minutes, and then we will have a discussion with, has everybody met Jeremy? This is actually the first time I've seen Jeremy in person, so, well, not in person, but seen a picture of Jeremy. This is Jeremy Stull, our new town administrator, and he is going to go over, hopefully everybody got a chance to review the documents about the status and potential uses of free cash for us to discuss. So this is kind of the meeting before the meeting in preparation for our joint meeting with the select board tomorrow, so that we can ask Jeremy all sorts of crazy detailed gory questions, and tomorrow can be more of a higher level discussion with the select board. So that is the plan for tonight. And if there are any other topics that I was not able to anticipate 48 hours in advance, please let me know. Hey, Jack, how are you?
Good, how are you all?
Great. So we do have Jack online, so if we need to take any votes, we have to do roll call, so everybody's going to say their name and then how they vote, including us in the room and those online. All right. Share. Hate doing something that new face. Okay, so I emailed these out a few days ago. Hopefully everybody got a chance to. They are up here. So we had a full attendance. And we reviewed meeting minutes from the 28th with no changes noted. We had discussion on reorganization, of which nothing essentially changed. We welcomed Billy as a clerk, so thank you. And we talked about committee participation. And we assigned main points of contact for affordable housing, MURSD budget subcommittee, capital improvement working group. I have not heard anything more about BVT budget discussions with the Hopedale Select Board. So I need to reach out back to them, but I haven't heard anything since.
Sorry to jump in immediately, Mike. I'm having a meeting with Scott Savage from the Hopedale Select Board on Friday to kind of kick off that process, introduce me to what they're trying to do. So I'll have an update for you next week, maybe.
Perfect.
How many Hopedale selectmen are there? Are there 3 or are there 5?
I don't know, actually. Only one reached out. I don't remember the gentleman's name. Jeremy, do you know how many select board members there are for Hopedale?
I don't. I'm meeting with Scott Savage, who has reached out to a handful of select board members here and myself to kind of start a dialogue. So my conversation with him is more of, what's your ask, what's your expectation? It's really kind of entry level.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to know how many there are and what their names are.
Yeah.
If I could.
Yeah, I'm sure we can look that up and email it out. So once we know more about that, we'll bring that back here and then figure out what actions we want to take, of how we want to interact, if at all, or whatever. So. And then we talked about budget cycle meeting days, Tuesdays at 7 work for most people. So
There's 3.
there's 3. What are the names?
Scott Savage, Gina, Galena Hazard, and Bernard Stock.
Okay.
Glenda, I guess Glenda. Bernie Scott. Glenda Hazard. Bernard Stock. Yeah. Scott Savage, yeah.
Great. All right, I get a motion to approve the meeting minutes from August 28th. Oh, sorry, I just realized that we have a mistake. These are-
Mr. Chair, I'm glad to move to accept the minutes. Jack Hodgins.
Second.
Any discussion after I made my amendment to the date to actually read the correct one? All right, all those in favor?
Ron Zamuto, aye. Nick Scantor, aye. Michael Mantelio, aye.
Go ahead, yes.
Jack Hodgins,
Mike Rager, aye. Great. Great. All right, so next item. Oh, stop sharing. Okay, good. All right, so I guess, Jeremy, I'll hand it off to you. Do you want to pop up anything on the screen, or how do you want to go forward with the discussion?
Yeah, I think that would be great. I will, I'll share some stuff here. Can you all see the free cash certification I'm talking about here?
Yeah.
Can you zoom in?
Ah, too much. Sorry.
No.
Is that our salary?
So this is our free cash certification for fiscal 24. These are, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't start here, but our number we're working with is $2.483 million, which is an astronomical number for a town with a $24 million budget. So we're at, 10% of our operating budget is our free cash. So what I want to go through here in this memo that I wrote is kind of what makes up that, how we got here, what that represents, and then how we can, my suggestions going forward, which are included in the Excel spreadsheet. So our free cash, our certified free cash is at $2.483 million. And just as a reminder, we are under an obligation to present a balanced budget each year. So budgeted revenues equal to budgeted expenditures. And then what we actually see each year, rather than our equal budget to budget, we see actual revenues and actual expenditures. And our free cash is the difference between those two things, plus the remaining free cash from the prior year. Plus, and this was the part where I needed an education from our accountants, plus what we call our credits or deficits. So if we have a deficit in a fund, DOR holds that back from our certified free cash. And the difference between the end of fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24, we saw a $300,000 difference in those deficits to the good. So DOR was holding this $300,000 and they essentially released it back to us. So that's kind of a one-time thing that we shouldn't expect to see again. So that's things like Chapter 90, which is a reimbursable program, things like our police detail account, some grants that are reimbursable. They're kind of idiosyncratic in nature. And it's my goal and every town administrator's goal to reduce those deficits at the end of year, at the end of every year. So those holdbacks from DOR are a lot less. So that's one piece. The next piece is our revenue drivers. So in fiscal 2024, we essentially had an additional motor vehicle excise. I mistyped here. So last 2023 motor vehicle excise collected and booked in fiscal 2024. It was a typo here. So there was about $250,000 that was collected in fiscal 2024, which we really should have expected in fiscal 2023. So that's a timing from the registry. That's something that we don't have control over the commitments from the registry. We get to put them out when we get them, and they're trying to do better. But the takeaway for us is this is $250,000 that really should have been collected in fiscal 23 and was instead collected in fiscal 24. So you can think of it as prior year's free cash was understated by $250,000, and then this year's free cash is overstated by $250,000.
And the root of this comes from the registry of motor vehicles making decisions outside of our control that just happen to not align with our budget cycle.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how much we could have corrected for that or booked a receivable or we're talking about the end of essentially the end of fiscal 23, the start of fiscal 24. So we're talking about, July and August of 2023, which is more than a year before I started. So I don't quite want to ascribe too much blame. I just know that it's a timing issue that we shouldn't expect to see every year, and we didn't see the year prior. So we essentially had 3 quarters worth of commitments the prior year and 5 quarters worth of commitments in fiscal 24. I've spoken with the assessors, and that she's going to do everything in her power to make sure that we book a receivable so that anything that comes in kind of after the date goes back to the fiscal year to which it should live.
I don't think anybody here is looking to blame anybody. I think what we want to make sure is we understand how that happened.
Yeah.
And how are we going to ensure it doesn't happen again? Like, what are we putting in our process or, checks and balances to make sure that we're doing those things at the correct time? Like, I understand the challenge with getting budget items correct when you're waiting on outside forces to make those decisions. We constantly have this discussion with the school district, right? Waiting on the state government to make lots of decisions before we know any numbers. If this is something similar where the RMV is simply making decisions that are not aligning with our budget process, that's great. How are we going to address that moving forward? So I think this is just you say we're going to make sure that it doesn't happen again. What is the process to do so? And to do so, you need to know how it happened before, right?
So right now, talking with the assessors, with the principal assessor, she had said that the registry is aiming to be at quarterly. So they're trying to change their process because they know how it impacts munis. From our end, if we have an estimate, if we have good communication with our registry and our DOR partners, we can, from the accounting side, book a receivable in the current fiscal year. And then so long as that money is in by the end of September, we can kind of backdate that revenue back to the prior fiscal year. That didn't happen here. We didn't book the receivable. So when the money came in, we couldn't backdate it. We had to realize it in the current fiscal year. And I want to say that collecting motor vehicle excise tax from the prior year is like a really common thing. So like in fiscal 24, we had, I think, $120,000 in our budget for prior year motor vehicle excise tax. And then instead of collecting $120,000, we collected $370,000. So we expect to collect a little bit, people coming in late, all those individual things that impact your revenue. But being $250,000 off was an issue with the timing of the remit and then not booking the receivable. Similar to those deficits that I talked about earlier, where it's my goal to work with department heads to minimize those deficits as we get towards the end of the fiscal year and make sure we have kind of our accounting ducks in a row. It's the same with making sure we book the receivable here. So even if registry puts us in a tight spot, we have a few tools at our disposal to be able to make sure the revenue gets in the correct fiscal year.
Okay.
The next one is a little bit more straightforward, ambulance revenue. So again, all of these numbers are not gross numbers, but are net numbers over budget. Our ambulance revenue, which is accounted for in the general fund, and then our related expenses are also accounted for in the general fund, were $150,000 above revenue. That's kind of a lagging, our expenses are kind of a lagging piece to that. We have a lot of revenue this year, but that means we have to restock the ambulance, we have to pay overtime, there's wear and tear on the ambulance. So there's not a one-to-one associated cost, but there will be some kind of cost felt to that in a not very even and direct way.
So the money we charge for the ambulance usage, does that have an assumed correlation to the expected expenditure of? I got to assume there are materials that are utilized when you go on a call. How have we priced that ambulance call in relation to average, outgoing of materials and expected wear and tear on the vehicle, right?
Pretty much, in other words, are we at least breaking even?
Yeah.
Are we losing?
Yeah, so it's an interesting policy question. Do we want to break even on advanced life support and basic life support operations, or do we just want to kind of recoup some of our costs? Because this is in the general fund and not its own revolving fund, that relationship is less apparent. There are some communities, including one of my prior communities, that has ambulance as a revolving fund. So any overtime related to ambulances, any restocking of the supplies within an ambulance, and then also the associated revenue are all kind of self-contained in one fund. But here they kind of get washed together with general fund revenues. So if there is increased need for supplies in the ambulance, the fire chief has the ability to kind of rob Peter to pay Paul and take money from other parts of his budget to fund that. So it's a discussion the fire chief and I have been having, whether we want to segregate that out. I don't think we're going to suggest that for fiscal 2026. In my first couple of months, I'm trying to figure out the lay of the land rather than shift too much of it in the first year. But it's something that we're conscious of and are trying to plan around. So you're definitely right to say that there are costs associated with increased ambulance usage. I just don't think that they're, based upon our general ledger and the way we account for both of these, super apparent.
So in some of conversations I've seen from people in town, there are some folks who believe that having a second ambulance operational is a financial benefit to the town. I think it would be great for us to have an analysis on, average extra revenue compared to average. I know that it can be totally different, and I have no idea how to spread those out.
Well,
but
again, I'm all for having another ambulance, sure.
yeah,
But before I support that, let's clean up what we got here so we can see. Again, it goes back to the simplest things, like you remember when the building department not charging enough to cover the cost for the inspector.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking $150,000 there.
yeah,
Why can't we check some balances?
yeah. So
But, conceptually, should this be a revenue source for the town, or should this be a break even?
Yeah, I would think a break even.
Right, this,
At least a break even.
right, at least a break even, but my point is, like, we shouldn't be looking at this as a revenue source to provide ambulance services to people who are in need of an ambulance. It should be something that it covers the cost of the operation versus a cash generation for people who need an ambulance.
yeah, I think it's a good discussion to have, and it's an existential question, and I'd just like to know where we are. Losing significant amounts of money. Do we break even? Like, where are we on that scale? And that helps drive other conversations, especially those in town who think getting a second ambulance up and going is a financial benefit to the town. Whereas, yes, having more life-saving equipment around, I mean, everybody can understand why that's a good thing, right? But if people are going to say, yes, this is a financial benefit to the town, I would like to be working off of data, not just assumption.
Right, but I think getting an ambulance, a second ambulance decision shouldn't be as a financial benefit to the town. It should be, does it provide the level of life-saving service that we need to provide for the town versus looking at it as an income generation?
Well, having all that data will also give us a clue on the actual need. Again, how many calls? Instead of going, oh yeah, we should have another ambulance just to drive around in, we should have some data.
Yeah.
And again, as everybody in this room knows, the bottom line is always money.
Yeah.
If we can't afford it, we can't afford it. But if we can break even doing it, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, so I think just in general, I'd like to take an action to get that together, and then we can go from there.
I just have a question.
I've got some homework on that one. I got some homework to do on that one for you, but kind of 2 points. As I said to the board of health the other day too. There's a general societal benefit to services that the Board of Health provides, just as there's a general societal benefit to having rescue and ambulance services. So I don't typically take the policy approach that fees should cover 100% of the operation. I think the general taxpayer benefits from the presence of this stuff rather than the marginal user paying for it. So there should be some taxpayer component to it. Also, the second ambulance doesn't necessarily always provide, double the coverage. What it provides for us is, this is mechanics, right? These are vehicles. These go out of service. These require they're taken off the road now and then. So having a second ambulance makes sure that we don't have that gap in coverage, that we're not relying on mutual aid partners as much when our piece of equipment's out of service. So
it's a two-way street. That's a two-way street. I'd like to know how much in town and how much out town. Like you just said, we don't want to rely on mutual aid, but do we want other town,
Yeah.
are we the bank?
Yeah, all of my opinions are formed based off of the data analysis that we're asking for. So let's start there, and then any other future conversations, it helps give us a better foundation of how we can find
Understanding and trying to make
Yes.
this informed decision.
I just have a real quick question though. So the 150,000 here, the revenue, where did the bulk of that come from? I know we don't have a breakdown, but I'm just curious more than anything, like, how did we get to that? Is it?
every time there's an ambulance run, we bill insurance, and then they pay us, pre-agreed amount based upon the type of service. So every type of thing you can imagine, and then it goes through the, apologies to anyone here in the insurance industry, but it goes through the Byzantine, approach to what insurance reimbursement is, and then we get that. So it's all service based. It's all a marginal amount.
Okay.
Going down our next sort of revenue, our next type of revenue, tax liens redeemed. So this is property tax that, quote unquote, as I said, should have been collected in prior years. So this number fluctuates year to year based upon how much we collect now, how much was outstanding in years prior. So it's $127,000, largely from the last handful of years, nothing dating back too far. But this, like I said, quote unquote, should have been spread out in prior years. This is old real estate tax that we just now collected. Cannabis local option sales tax, $80,000. So for some, perhaps this commission knows, but the town has not budgeted anything for cannabis local option sales tax. And I want to be clear, this is not host community agreement impact fee money, which the town does not collect. This is local option sales tax that the consumer pays at the point of transaction, which is remitted to the Department of Revenue and then remitted to us on a quarterly basis. So the town budgeted $0 in fiscal 24 and collected about $80,000. In fiscal 25, it also budgeted $0. And so far in the first quarter, we collected $31,000, which is about, I think, $7,000 more than we collected in the first quarter of last year. So it's nice.
Is this the 3%? Is that
This is the 3%. This is a 3% local option sales tax. It's not the impact fee, which is also 3%, which makes the conversations a little confusing. But the town of Mendon does not collect an impact fee, which is now mired in all sorts of lawsuits with the Cannabis Control Commission. So this is the local option sales tax, which almost every municipality which has a cannabis operation levies.
So that tells, basic math is what, $2.7 million worth of sales?
And
Yes,
that's probably gonna go up because the other one's opening up right now.
$2.7 million of sales in our shops that have been open, maybe not a full year, right?
Yeah, not even a full year.
So what,
Yeah, it's not
What does
budgeted, yeah.
spark them up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, and by the way,
Some people say money doesn't grow on trees, but other things do, right?
and by the way, that's all cash, don't forget. Has to be cash.
Right, okay, can't be
Can't
credit.
use a credit card.
Yeah, so that money's remitted to the state and then remitted to us, like I said. So my plan for fiscal 26 is to budget a conservative number in there, and that Mike Goddard select board member Mike Goddard had a question for me about, after all of this, how much can we expect to the fiscal 26 budget to kind of expand, right? Like we want to kind of sharpen our pencils on the revenue projections a little bit. So you can expect to see a cannabis local option sales tax budgeted amount rather than budgeting for zero.
So how are we going to understand those sales projections? Like, are we gonna get the local establishments in town and talk to them about probably individually their business plans in order to understand that? Like, I don't even know how we would make estimates there that are legitimate. Other than using some of the historical data and interpolating, but.
Yeah, I would, because it's not that long of a data set for us. I could take the quarterly data, see how lumpy it is, right? Maybe folks buy more cannabis in the summer months, or maybe they buy more in the winter months. So see how lumpy it is, and then take a super conservative estimate from there. So if I reasonably thought we can bring in $80,000 every year, my budget would be 55. So we're not. Even if we have a bad couple of quarters, we're not caught with our pants down, so to speak, on a budgetary sense.
Is that the same method with alcohol? The taxes on alcohol?
No, this is.
We don't, there's no local option sales tax on alcohol. The excise tax on alcohol is remitted directly to the state. We don't get a piece of that.
So you said the first quarter was 31,000? I'm sorry, it was higher than expected, you said, correct?
Yeah, so the first quarter of fiscal 25 was 31,000, and I believe the first quarter of fiscal 24 was somewhere around 24,000.
Yeah, because that makes sense, because I think the other store just opened up.
That could be a slippery slope. The state could all of a sudden treat it like alcohol and say, no.
So this is a
No, I think that was.
I think it's part of the deal.
It was part of the deal, that's what I thought, way back.
Yeah.
I know what Mike's saying, though, they could change it, but I think they would get incredible.
I mean, the state has never changed anything in their favor
Yeah.
forever, right?
But I don't, yeah, I know what you're saying, but I know what you're saying, but,
So his idea of being conservative.
yeah, it's a good idea.
Is a very good.
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
But I think we should budget something so that we're being reasonable. We don't see this $80,000 influx. We see in my example a $25,000 influx, and we use that $55,000 to make part of the general operating budget, and we make investments in the town as a matter of course, rather than these what I call one-offs, but actually maybe structural surpluses.
Yeah, I mean, there are places where, $10,000 for a certain department here can be meaningful, right? So.
Very much, yeah.
Oh, I have plenty of ideas.
Okay.
The total revenue, and then so I didn't go through any of the small drivers, right? But the total revenue above budget was $960,000. So there was $1 million in revenue we took in that was unbudgeted. And then the other side of that coin, like I talked about, our budget's even, and then our revenues and our expenditures, and we talked about that gap. We had $941,000 in unexpended accounts, or what we call department turnbacks, all sorts of terms. So police overtime, which police, it's just say salaries and overtime, $100,000. They had somebody on unpaid leave, and then didn't quite have to fill overtimes in the way they originally anticipated, or had to fill overtimes at a lower rate. So we wouldn't expect to see that $100,000 year over year, according to Chief Kersey. Clough renovation, there was $50,000 even in the budget. I'm not quite sure the genesis of that, but it was unspent. Highway salaries, they had some vacancies. They had some employees who didn't make it through their probationary period, so they had some turnover. That was $58,000. Board of Health had some contractual services they didn't expend, and then little bits and pieces all over the place. Under the $10,000 or $30,000, $10,000 to $20,000 line means we had $900,000 in unexpended budgets. So what I'm trying to classify that as is that was $940,000 worth of investments that we wanted to make. So whether it was in services, whether it was in capital, equipment, people, additional staff, whatever it was, we didn't make those investments. And my suggestions on how to use free cash within this fiscal year is to try to make some of those targeted investments.
But it sounds like most of these were due to the police overtime, highway salaries, and Board of Health Services. It sounds like there was an assumed need in the town that just didn't materialize, right? So to me, that the Clough renovation one is the only one to me that sounds like an investment that didn't go through, which I'd like to understand more from Jay. So I don't know if you can reach out to Jay Beyer and just ask him about the details of what was planned to be renovated at Clough that was paid for through our budget, that wasn't part of the MRSA budget.
That didn't get done.
Yeah, that didn't get done. So please correct my assumptions if I'm incorrect in how I stated about the other ones, but those just feel like, hey, we provide services to the town didn't need as many because they are reactive in nature, and luckily those reactions didn't happen.
Again, an easy one is the highway salaries in OT. So that's what didn't get spent in overtime.
Like luckily Providence Road didn't wash out and we didn't need people
And
there.
luckily last winter.
Yeah, it was also they had vacancies and turnover that, you know, so they were short staffed, and they you know, didn't get to. When we see savings like this, it also means a lack of productivity, right? There was only 4 people doing the work instead of 5, and we saved a quarter of a year worth of someone's salary or something like that. But I think your Chair Krager, I think your characterization's right in that most of the big drivers were kind of, I don't want to say idiosyncratic, but you know, we wouldn't expect to see them year over year. Apart from the Clough renovation, which I said that's one I don't quite understand yet.
Yeah, so I mean, some of these can be cyclical in nature, and so yeah, I agree with the assessment. I wouldn't just say going into next budget season it wouldn't be expected, because you never know, it could be worse, right?
No, but again, we got to look at this and question it, so that the attitude of, I got to spend it all this year because I won't get the same amount next year.
Yeah.
So I'd like to address that specifically, because I hear that from department heads all the time. I should have done this to begin with. So prior to coming to Mendon, I was the chief financial officer at the Bristol County Sheriff's Office. And prior to that, I was the budget director and capital projects administrator for the city of Attleboro. And just before that, I was a budget analyst for the public schools of Brookline. So I've dealt a lot with municipal department heads and that kind of use it or lose it attitude. So I try to really develop these relationships of trust to say, if you don't need something at the end of the fiscal year, you know, don't have this use it or lose it attitude. But at the same token, if you need something mid-fiscal year, come to me and we'll kind of like work it out. So I want people to be spending the budgets they need and not thinking that I'm going to advocate for a cut of $100 just because they didn't buy that last $100 worth of office supplies, and then they have, you know, 600 boxes of Sharpies sitting in the closet that they don't need. So I try to develop those relationships, and I'm pretty vocal about you know, not having a use or lose it attitude, but being supportive of coming to me, because you know, someone who turned back $5,000 in services this year might have those services that just spilled over into August or September instead. So that money came through to free cash. And if they come to me and say, hey, this contract got pushed back, I need an additional $5,000, I want to be in the position to advocate for those needs, rather than them spend the $5,000 at the end of the fiscal year and then also need it again next year.
Yeah, no,
Doesn't
I mean,
always work, but
I support that general thought process and approach. Like, I don't want to jump to conclusions and make make assumptions about how next year is going to go. But if we show a data trend over a few fiscal years, we look back 5 fiscal years and it's like, well, you're always giving $100,000 back to free cash. Like, all right, maybe it's time to rethink what we asked for, right? So, yeah.
So I will say, at the last select board meeting, I gave kind of a late Q1 rough update as to where we are financially. So I would encourage the commission to go look at that. As we get to at the end of Q2 and I have a little bit more polished of a presentation, I'd be happy to join and give you all a presentation to say kind of a mid-year update. Like here's where we are at the end of Q2, because I think the $2.4 million in free cash surprised some folks, and I don't want folks to be surprised. You should kind of be abreast of where we are financially throughout the year. So I'd be
I will
happy to
say-
join it.
It will be a breath of fresh air to see that sort of operating model, so.
Me too. Happy to. But as you can tell from my, middle of the meeting introduction, my background's in municipal finance. So this is kind of where, it's not the most important thing, right? The ambulance service is more important than, my accounting reports. But if we don't have the budget in place, don't have the revenues in place, we can't do anything else anyway. So it's not the most important service, but it's the most important foundation. And I thank all of you for your service in this committee, because I think it's really important to the municipal government. And I'm not even asking for votes tonight, so that's not just to butter you up. I'm serious. So some other factors that we talked about. So if you recall, at the end of fiscal year 24, we had $243,000 worth of free cash from the prior year, which was unspent. That was uncommon if we looked at prior fiscal years and how much was left unspent. In the 3 prior fiscal years, it was a total of less than $1,000. So to have 1 year of $250,000 was kind of anomalous. So between that $250,000, the $250,000 in motor vehicle excise, and the $300,000 in kind of deficit closing, that's $800,000 that are one-time-ish that we shouldn't really expect. They're not structural surpluses.
I think some of the more experienced members will probably be able to talk to this better than I. But there was probably a heavy reliance on knowing that there would be a bunch of free cash at the end of the fiscal year, and maybe the right planning wasn't put in place ahead of time, knowing that cushion always existed, right? So maybe this is a testament to the improved planning and execution from our department heads and people in finance from a previous fiscal year. So.
Yeah, we didn't need.
Absolutely. Our job is to protect the taxpayer and protect the budget and make sure everything is running as smooth as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we do in our jobs, right? Everybody who's sitting at this table has budgets to deal with 7-Eleven. So I think this gentleman here is on the right track so far.
Good.
I'm trying. So we also had some smaller surpluses. Cherry sheet aid. So the state aid. The Commonwealth is among the worst in the country at passing a budget on time. Something like 10 out of the last 13 years, they've started a fiscal year without a budget. So what we anticipate for cherry sheet aid and put into our tax recap, even at this point of the year, sometimes the state budget is not finalized. Small increases in state aid. And then that $327,000, that's the piece that I talked about deficits being reduced. So this is the piece I needed a kind of an accounting lesson on. So previously there was $700,000 worth of deficits that we had the cash, so to speak, and DOR on paper held that back. And that $700,000 essentially went to $400,000. So they released $300,000 of our own money back to us. And a lot of that was in Chapter 90. So Chapter 90 is a reimbursable program. So we set up a budget in a fund equal to what we think the revenue, or what we have been told the revenue from the state is. And then we contract with folks to, repair and replace our roads, and we pay money out of that fund. So budgetarily, we're even. We have a budgeted revenue, budgeted expense, and we pay the expense out. But on a cash basis, we don't actually have that revenue in until we submit those expenditures to the state. Say, hey, we paid this out, and then they reimburse us.
Okay, that's why it's a deficit. So, because the only reason it works out is just from a budgetary perspective. We've actually deficit spent because we didn't
It's
have the
not-
cash.
It's not a budgetary deficit, it's a cash deficit. So the cash deficit, it's up to the treasurer in the intra-year period or in the intra-month period within the fiscal year period to make sure the check clears, right? That's what we have a treasurer for, amongst other things. But then we submit for that reimbursement. So talking with our accountant, it's pretty easy to close if you're kind of on top of it, in that you just have to prove to the state that prove to DOR that you've submitted for reimbursement. You don't even need the reimbursement. You need to prove you submitted for reimbursement by, I think it's September 15th, to not get quote unquote dinged on free cash. So I kind of attribute that large deficit in Chapter 90 to there not being a permanent TA at this point last year, and just people kind of not having their eyes on it. So I haven't looked at prior year Chapter 90 deficits, but I think last year's was kind of an anomaly for how high it was. So it's on my radar. It's on the highway surveyor's radar. It's on the accountant's radar. So we should see that Chapter 90 deficit kind of either be eliminated or be close to eliminated in at least my 10-year worth of free cash certifications. And then the same sort of thing with earmarks. Those function in the same kind of accounting budget versus cash way that I talked about Chapter 90. They're from the state. The state says, we're giving you this earmark for X, Y, and Z, and we can spend the money. But then if the money's not in the door by the time our books close, DOR holds that cash back, in their very conservative estimation. Well, if the earmark never comes through, you're going to have to use free cash to come up with that deficit. And that was not the case. We got the earmark money that came in, so that free cash hold was released. But these are all very one-time in nature, that $327,000. And then I thought it was important to show just kind of the magnitude here and the history of certified free cash, going back to fiscal 19. So, in the $500,000 to $750,000 range. And then to see a $2.4 million number is, a lot.
Yeah. Great.
I'm not going to scroll down to the next part of my memo because it was kind of a snapshot in time of free cash use, and I'm going to pivot over to my Excel sheet a little bit later to talk about what I think are, uses of free cash for the special town meeting warrant. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen. I guess take any sort of questions here or where we want to go next. If you want to go to the warrant, if you want to go to anything specific.
Anybody have anything?
We could jump into the warrant. Is that what we're gonna do tomorrow night? Because I'm not sure I can make tomorrow night's meeting.
Yeah, I believe tomorrow night we will be going over the warrant. I know it was part of having this discussion and then the proposals. I think we would jointly discuss the proposals of how to use free cash tomorrow. So I definitely want to make sure we go through what those proposals are. So.
Tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, good,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, so we should go through those
So we get a
tonight.
flavor of what we're.
Yeah,
I don't know if I can make it tomorrow.
Yeah, so we all get aligned, at least get an understanding of the group.
Sure.
And if we're all aligned, then it'll be easy to have a group approach. So I don't have any questions about how we got to the level of free cash. And I just want to say, Jeremy, thank you for that discussion and that detail. It is a breath of fresh air to see the openness and the detail. So it's great.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I'm happy to. I think it's way easier to explain things beforehand than after the fact. So I will share the warrant, the draft warrant here. All right. Let me zoom in a little bit. All right, so can you all see my Word document here of the draft warrant?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Zoom in a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Unless we move right up to the.
Yeah, Ron's got his.
I got mine, so
back there,
I'm cheating, so yeah.
All right, is this a little bit better?
Yep.
So there are a few things which I think the committee will probably appreciate almost as like kind of, I don't want to say non-negotiables because it's not my vote to have, but kind of need to haves. So these are bills of a prior year. So these are things that there's 7 of them there, and there's probably 7 different reasons why they didn't get paid in time. So we have until July 15th to make any sort of transfers that we need into reasonable accounts. And then we have until, forget the date, a few weeks later to actually pay some stuff. Sometimes it's the bill gets sent to the wrong person. We had changes in both the executive assistant and the town administrator, and our finance director left. So there's a whole host of reasons why one bill or another didn't get paid. But we have $13,000 worth of bills of a prior year to pay. And I'm, suggesting we use free cash to pay for those rather than, just pay them directly rather than make transfers within the general fund budget. I think the committee's probably pretty familiar with those as a concept.
That ready refresh for $5.80, I think that's a no-go.
What's the big one there? $5,000?
For Eric?
That's our town accountant. So our town accountant bills us $5,000 per month. Hopefully he's not watching. I don't know how we get kind of such a deal. $60,000 a year, we would never be able to hire, even a 3/4 staff, inclusive of benefits for that sort of thing. They provide a great service for us. I wish I had someone down the hall I can walk to and ask questions, but they're very responsive on a email, phone call basis. And just for whatever reason, their June bill didn't get to who it needed to get to in time. So that's their 1 month bill.
I agree, yeah, that's great, but again, my question is, he's in the town hall, why did that get overlooked?
I think
I can understand $5.80, I can understand $185, even the $400, the tree guy, I can understand that, but $5,000, if it's a series of things, what happened? I'd just like to know,
Yeah,
what crap did that fall through?
I think Jeremy's, we lost the town administrator, the executive assistant, and the finance director all in the same period of time when all of these things were transacting.
Okay.
So I can easily jump to the conclusion that things just sort of missed through the night, and then we finally picked up all the papers. Like, oh, this one hasn't been paid yet.
It could have arrived on June 25th and then sat there for 2 days and then got thrown on a desk. 3 days later, before you know it, it's July, and then it's too late.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I wasn't here, but that seems the plausible thing that I had thought. So our finance director left on July 5th. The executive assistant and I both started on July 8th. And there was a week in between where we didn't have an interim town administrator, where Greg was on vacation. And the executive assistant had left in April. And the permanent TA had left the previous June. So $13,000 is probably a little high for us, but all those things considered, I thought there actually might be some more in there than there actually are.
Mike, I think you were asking about the community solar.
Yeah, what was the
What is
community solar? Again, why I'm asking is because I've been to many town meetings. That's low hanging fruit for somebody in the audience to say, whoa, what's going on there?
Yeah, so the community solar is actually
When someone's gonna ask me, I wanna make sure I have an understanding of why, so I can answer it correctly.
Yeah, certainly. So these had previously been handled by our executive assistant. Like I said, she had left. Laura had left in April, I think. And
No,
then
I think Mike's question is like, what is the bill for?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So community solar. So we get a bunch of, it's like a net metering sort of program. So we get a bunch of solar credits that we end up with a payment for. And then we remit part of that back to the solar provider. So it's a net, I don't have the exact number on it, but it's a net revenue for the town. So we probably had a $4,000, $3,500 revenue piece to that, and then we remit part of that to the solar operator. So it's contractual, multi-year in nature, and it's actually a net positive for the town. It's just the way it transacts is a large in and a slightly smaller out.
Okay, so through the credit programs provided by solar, we get an input of revenue from that credit. This is then going back to pay, so we get the credit from the government to pay for the solar, and then this is paying their bill essentially from that credit.
Yeah, it's actually from the utility that we get paid from, not from like the federal government or anything like that, because it's marginal in terms of how much solar we generate. But because we don't own the solar, but we own the account on which it's rendered, I guess is the word. We get the payment from the utility, and then part of our contractual agreement is we owe something like 90% of that back to the folks who made the investment in creating the solar fields.
So are they submitting an invoice, or is this something that we do automatically?
Yep. No, they submit an invoice, and we had a stack of months of them that were unpaid because of the individual responsible for it left, and it fell through the cracks and didn't get picked up. So this is actually one where we cleaned up most of it, and then this one we missed this one.
All right, that's understandable.
So our benefit here with using the community solar is simply the reduced electric bill by by not having to pay for, National Grid, because we don't own the panels, but the people who own the panels, the credits come from the utility. The revenue of the credit comes from the utility company. It comes to us, and then we need to pay the people who own the panels, because that's how they're making their money. And the benefit to the town is simply the reduced electric bill.
Right.
And
So
they,
that particular invoice got lost in the shuffle.
Yeah. Okay.
and the amount they're allowed to make is all capped by, I think it's the DOER or the DPU, the Department of Public Utilities, the the Office of Energy Affairs or Energy Regulation. I forget the State Department, but it's all capped on a state program. They can't just charge us, usury rates or anything. And it's all in multi-year agreements.
But it's a net positive at the end of the day, right? Is that what you said?
Yes, definitely. Yep.
And while we're on it, I guess before we jump off of this, might as well talk about the top one too. I forget what that is.
Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, and Lehane is our town council.
Oh, right.
So law firms are notorious for being super, super late in their billing. Actually, Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, and Lehane was the city solicitor in my previous community in Attleboro, and we almost always had late bills from them and other councils. You get on them, you often get half-month bills for June in time that you need it. We have an ability to encumber, so to set aside monies and pay bills as they come in later in the year. So it's one of my goals to come back to this meeting and hold me to it, but it's one of my goals to make sure that as we get closer to June 30th and July 15th of each year, that we're encumbering a sufficient amount of money at the end of the fiscal year to pay these kind of somewhat known costs that are outstanding. So the $5,000 is really easy to fix. The $3,200, now that we have the context, I hope is easy to fix. The smaller dollar amounts, small vendors who don't do a lot of work with governments aren't always the most responsive on terms of end of our fiscal year. But then with the town council bill, if we can just encumber a reasonable amount at the end of the year, we would have a smaller need to come to special town meeting to pay for it.
And what is Ready Refresh?
It's the water coolers that we have in town.
Oh,
in town.
okay. Yeah.
I'm glad you asked that because I really didn't want to, but I was curious.
Jeremy, I have a question. And to make it basic, why are we going to free cash versus absorbing it in the current year budget? It seems like a small amount.
So we would use it's a reasonable question. Two things. One, this early in the fiscal year, I kind of want to retain the integrity of our original budgets in terms of what the expenditure line items are. So I don't want to say, because we budgeted a certain amount for, yes, we could absorb the $400 and the $5, but the $4,000, right? We budgeted a certain amount for legal services in the current fiscal year. So I don't want to use 25 money to pay for a 24 expense, because that just means I'm going to need money at the end of 25 now, if all else kind of stays equal. With the that's certainly true of the town accountant invoice, because if we now pay this out of 25, now we have 13 instances of $5,000 rather than 12 instances, and then we'll need money at the end of the fiscal year. And the other way would be to fix that with FinCom reserves. But taking a cue from select board, I've actually added money to FinCom reserves to assist in kind of end of year flexibility. So I could use FinCom reserves now, but then I would have to add more money to FinCom reserves to get to the level requested by select board. So, I have like 6 phrases that you're all going to be sick of hearing, but one of them is like, different pocket, same pair of pants. Like it's the same money. So if we use it out of free cash now, we don't have to take it from FinCom reserves later. But then if we don't have to take it from FinCom reserves later and then we don't use it, then it falls through to free cash again. So it either stays in free cash or eventually makes its way to free cash if we don't end up needing it. So it's not a bad question, but it ends up being 6 of one, half dozen of another.
Sure.
Of another.
So it's safe to assume that in the town council budget for last year, they turned back basically $4,500.
That's a great way of thinking about it, that it's unexpended from last year. It made its way to free cash, so we should then use
But
free cash to pay
is
for
that
it.
true? Or is that
Yeah.
just a state?
I don't know that they actually turned back 4,500. I'll find out about that.
Yeah.
If they
Again,
didn't turn
that's-
back 4,500,
Those are
it
things
could
I
be
think
that.
about.
When
No,
is
it's
their budget year?
sorry.
What's their budget year run?
Give me a sec. I'll find out for you.
Okay.
So this free cash that gets certified is from last year. Meaning that 4380, the 5,000, the 3,200, we should be able to look back and say, oh, look at that, that's what attributed to the amount of free cash.
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking is,
That's part of what it
if you put it, you don't give it to the departments now, they have the budget to it. You can obviously come back at the end of the year if they need it, or if they made other decisions to balance out their budget, that might be a little bit more advantageous. But I defer to everybody else in terms of the politics of town meetings.
You never know. It's a question.
But it sounds, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, though, it sounds like some of these items were because of the turnover at the town hall, is that correct?
Certainly the community solar and the town accountant, the $5,000 ones. Yes, definitely.
Right, but again, we have checks and balances, so I know I'm gonna ask the question, did $4,300 fall into free cash at the end of this last fiscal year? Because if someone says, well, gee, no, well, then that's an overage.
Where is it? Right.
You follow what I'm saying, it kind of helps us realize, did we budget it right? Did we short them on their budget? Or, just again, so we can make informed decisions. But believe me when I tell you, if they were not prepared to answer any of those questions at the town meeting floor,
That's what people ask.
it'll be asked.
That's why I'm glad the ready, refresh question was asked.
And the last thing I really want is for Mike or any one of us, who happens to be the chairman that has to get up and speak for us, be caught with their pants down, not knowing.
So does it need to be on the November special town warrant? Can it be on the May? Like, it's such a small amount. I guess that's what I'm saying. If you're concerned about the town talking about,
I don't think this,
I don't-
I don't think this is going to be a concern at town meeting.
okay.
The November,
Other than the fact
usually,
that somebody wants to know why,
Some- yeah.
why didn't that bill get paid?
Yeah, somebody will ask that exact question. I can probably name the person who will ask it. And I think all of I think Jeremy can very easily cover all of the
Sure.
reasons why, and I think that will be accepted.
Yeah.
So Mike, to answer your direct question, so there's $80,000 budgeted both last year and this year for legal services, 80. And left in the budget at the end of fiscal 24 was $1,100. So had this bill been paid in a timely manner, we would have needed an additional $3,200 to be transferred from FinCom reserves. So that $3,200 stayed in FinCom reserves, fell through to free cash, along with this $1,100 in unspent revenue or unspent expenditures. And then those in combination are in free cash, and we're using that now to pay for this $4,300 bill.
Okay, so that leads to the next question that we're entitled to ask is why? Why did they go over their budget? What caused the budget over? We don't need the specifics, you know what I mean? We don't need a blow by blow.
Yeah, two conceptual things. One, the budget hasn't increased for 3 years, so it's been $80,000. And two, without a permanent town administrator, the select board, various committees, and various department heads were constantly running to town council with questions that didn't require town council input. But they wanted cover without a town administrator. Is maybe me projecting a little bit, but it's been my lived experience trying to rein in use of town council for stuff. So I think without a town administrator, folks wanted town council input, and that, you know, the meter's running every time you talk to them.
You don't by any chance have right there the previous year, do you? What we spent on town council the previous year when we did have a town administrator? I would just be curious.
I would need to be on the town network to grab that. I'd need
But that's fine.
I can find that for you by tomorrow, though.
Great. I mean, it's 4%, basically is what it is, that they ran over, practically 4%.
And again, because we followed the chain of events, how we asked the questions, I'm very satisfied with what he said.
Yeah.
That will calm the waters on the town meeting floor, that particular expert, because nobody wants to be, again, of course I'm gonna ask for legal advice. We don't have a town administrator, none of us are lawyers, so we're gonna ask to keep ourselves out of trouble.
You have to ask some expert, and unfortunately, that expert costs a lot of money the minute they open their mouth. Yeah.
No such thing as a free phone call to a lawyer.
Very good.
Yeah, they're $220 an hour. I am salaried and far, far less than that. So ask me your questions.
Gentlemen, as a member of the bar here, I'm gonna ask that this is all in good fun, I assume, right? The lawyer jokes. This is all in good fun.
Absolutely. None of this is serious at all.
Oh yeah, forgot about
Jack, I'm glad you donate your time to this committee.
So the next article, which is way more money and I think way less contentious, is appropriation into stabilization. So actually, let me stop sharing this. I want to share a very brief analysis that I did on stabilization. So again, I will make it bigger. 1 second. So right now, or when I at least did this, our stabilization balance was $1.1 million, which if you put that over our fiscal 25 budget is about 4.76%, which is healthy. I'll say before I get into this, before I got into Massachusetts municipal government, I was a bond rating analyst on the municipal team for Fitch Ratings. So I think of a lot of things through credit rating and how credit rating analysts think of municipal finance profiles when they go to rate bonds, when we go to the debt capital markets. So that's a decent percentage for a Massachusetts municipality. What I said here was $500,000 contribution to stabilization would bring our new balance to $1.6 million. There are some articles later which would increase our fiscal 25 budget that are noted here. So I added that to what our fiscal 25 budget is. And then I said that new $1.6 million in stabilization over the new general fund number is about 6.8%. So when you think of what you have in stabilization, so I think 6.8 is a really, or 6 to 8, I mean, percent is a really healthy range to be in. It's consistent with a lot of other municipalities in Massachusetts and what they have as a stabilization fund. I think when you get up above that 7 or 8% range, there's like too big of an opportunity cost. There, you're sitting on too much. It's too conservative. You could be making investments on that. You are earning interest on that money, but you're not using that to increase town services. Whereas if you get below that 4% range, you're limiting your ability to absorb shocks. Luckily, the town doesn't have a huge reliance on state aid, right? We're about $500,000. But the schools have a heavy reliant on state aid in terms of Chapter 70. So we can see an external shock from a state aid perspective, and an increased demand from schools in ways that you want your stabilization to be able to ride through those shocks. That's what it's there for. In addition to kind of catastrophic sort of events where you need money right away for something unforeseen. So bond rating agencies want you to stick away as much as possible because they're very conservative folks. So after talking with some select board members, my suggestion was $500,000. Certainly all these are up for debate. But I wanted to show you kind of the math on what $500,000 meant for us on a broader perspective.
Okay. Yeah. I'll take your guidance on this.
Oh, yeah.
It all sounds appropriate. Yeah. Does that better bond rating help us at all in discussions around rates and financing vehicles that are being proposed for the senior community center?
So we're a AA+ community, which is quite good. So in the AA+ band, you have AA, and then you have AA+ and AA-. The amount of money we would have to kind of sock away and the investment we would have to make to get to a AAA level, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, sort of thing. So the difference we would see in borrowing rates between a AA+ community and a AAA community are marginal. And so I wouldn't advocate us going above that kind of 8%, that 9-10% to try to get to AAA rating, because we would be socking away too much money to save not that much money. We don't have that much debt as a community. So that level and increasing our stabilization helps us stay at a AA+. I don't think we're in danger. We have a neutral outlook. So we're not in danger of losing the AA+. But when you're thinking about stabilization as a percentage of your general fund, you need to continue to contribute to it each year, or your percentage is going to go down in a relative value. So yeah, borrowing cost, but there's so many other factors in addition to ratings that impact your borrowing costs, which is, the general economic trends impact it way more than what our stabilization is. So if we had borrowed for the senior and community center, 2 years ago, if the project was at a stage where we could do that, we would face far lower borrowing costs than we will, next spring, should it be a successful vote.
Okay.
There's just far bigger forces at play. Article 3, so we have a capital expenditure account, which was created by special act of the state legislature, and we are capped at adding $100,000 to it each year. We have about $300,000 in the account right now, 312, 321, I forget. So this, again, is adding money to a capital expenditure account. If you all looked at my Providence Street culvert memo, I propositions using this money to avoid borrowing costs for what is perceived to be about a $2 million project. So I think putting money away to avoid these borrowing costs and to have an account where we can invest in capital kind of quickly is prudent for the town, and it's been a move that the town's made in the last couple of town meetings, as far as I can tell.
I think we also need to put in place a bylaw to be able to raise that maximum.
Because it was created by special act, we need a special act from the legislature to do so. But nothing prevents us from just making more capital expenditure investments each year, which as we get through this warrant, we'll certainly see a number of them. It's just that account specifically.
So, Jeremy, may I just ask a question? This is Jack Hodgins here. May I just ask a question going back to your stabilization fund? I just want to make sure that understand your point that to use an example, I guess, of perhaps a community that has got a stabilization fund that is enviable on the one hand, but on the other hand, perhaps at least in your view, may be perhaps a bit too sizable would be an example like Milford, right? Milford, somewhere in the order of magnitude of approximately 25% or something like that.
I know it's
Versus,
high. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I know it's high.
yeah, so like Milford, and of course, Milford is not obviously an equivalent from the standpoint of its tax base, obviously, nor its budget and the mix of commercial and residential and the like. But just by way of comparison, that's about 25% of their budget, their annual town budget. They can then, which is over $100 million, they can basically have for stabilization. We're at somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4, and it would be your view that we want to get a little bit more comfortable than 4 and be up in the 8% range.
Yeah, we definitely have a different mix of revenues than Milford. So I left Brookline in I put in my notice Brookline in February of 2020 and started in Attleboro in April of 2020. So both my assumptions as to my Brookline budget blew up, and everything that they thought in Attleboro blew up too, because March of 2020 happened in the middle of it. So one thing that was really evident is that different revenue structures behave differently in times of economic stress. So a place like Brookline was super dependent on things like parking meter receipts and meal excise tax and hotel excise tax in ways that Attleboro absolutely was not. Those were important, but they didn't balance the budget on it. And in a place like Mendon, where we're, $24 million budget and 19 million of it is in local property tax, where we have the ability to raise that levy 2.5% each year. Perhaps in times of economic stress, we're going to see new growth really contract, and we're going to see perhaps not the political will to tax to the levy, but those super economic sensitive revenues to which Milford enjoys in good times, but then it's to their detriment in bad times, we don't have here in Mendon. So I think it's prudent for them. I'm not going to comment on their financial management in terms of the gross number of 25%, but I think it's prudent for them to think of having a stabilization that weathers them through economic downturn bigger than Mendon requires.
Yeah, but it's all very helpful. And I was merely citing Milford, just order of magnitude and direction. I wasn't suggesting, obviously, that we're comparing an apple to an apple or an orange to an orange here, but it's a community that's not far away, and I do have a level of familiarity with it, having grown up there and having been on the finance committee there in Milford. And they do have, for example, I'm looking at the data here from Division of Local Services, and I believe the budget, if this is correct, operating budget, there was 150 million in contrast to ours. I mean, so it's substantially in excess of what ours is. And there's also provision for example, a special purpose stabilization fund, within that as well, right? So there's a stabilization, then a special purpose. So there's different buckets, if you will, different buckets of money that's available. So this is helpful. This is helpful for me anyway, in terms of order of magnitude, suggesting that we've been running it a little light here. It sounds like in terms of our stabilization fund. That's I think the message that is being communicated to us.
Yeah. I don't think it's irresponsible but it's especially with the ability to contribute now. I think this is a great time to get to what I view as a level of comfort. It's not like we were skating by at 1.5% each year. We wouldn't be a AA plus community if that was true.
And by light, I didn't mean to ascribe any motives there either, in the sense that much of it depends upon ability, right? And the
Yeah,
ability
certainly.
to make those to make those allocations, and at least in part, the ability to make those allocations when the stream of revenue makes it appropriate to be able to do so. And in this town, we have obviously gone through some quite lean times where we haven't had that opportunity either.
The best time to fix the roof is when the sun's shining, right? So like we have the ability now, and we want to put it together. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for those questions. Article 4 is of a similar vein. So other post-employment benefits. So GASB, the Government Accountability Standards Board, I think it's statement 75, talks about how you account for on your balance sheet other post-employment benefits. So GASB and our auditors and thus our rating agencies are now thinking of our liability here similar to our pension liability. So other post-employment benefits are essentially retiree healthcare costs. So paying for premiums in advance of Medicare age, or paying or share of premiums, and then paying for a share of premiums of Medicare supplemental plans for active retirees, or for folks who have retired from the town. So it takes into account actuary tables and everything similar to how a net liability for or total liability for a pension system works. So our total OPEB liability right now is over $5 million. And we have an OPEB trust. So we contribute money to this, invested every year through Bartholomew and Company. Sorry, our current balance is $200,000. I apologize. I was reading the last year's position. So our current net position is $200,000 on a liability of over $5 million. How this liability is calculated is always a bit skeptical. It assumes a pretty high rate of retention and retirement of folks in town, which doesn't quite get realized. I will say when I was in Attleboro, we had a liability of over $300 million, and our OPEB trust was about $300,000. So this is a problem, and a new problem for municipalities, but it's a problem municipalities all over the country are starting to tackle, and kind of chipping away at it. So the idea is that you contribute to this trust, and then you contribute to the trust at the same time as contributing your pay-go amount. So your yearly amount for OPEB, you continue to pay in addition to contributing to this trust. And then once the trust is significant enough of a position and it throws off dividends and interest each year, you can use that dividends and interest to pay for your yearly retiree costs. So it is quite a long-term investment. The town is not going to see any budgetary relief or any real benefit from this for many, many years. But I think it's prudent on a year-to-year basis to continue chipping away at this liability and continue building up the trust in at least a small part.
I would say this is consistent from what I've heard all my time being part of this committee. We don't have enough money here, but nobody else does either. We should just keep chipping away at it.
So obviously, open to, want to make it $75,000, we can talk about it. But 50 is consistent with some prior years. This one is Article 5 is financial in nature. So at you may all be aware, at annual town meeting, and I think it was a Scrivener's error in that the salary voted for the town clerk rather than being a percentage consistent with other non-union folks and with the union agreements that were in place or soon to be in place. She was given a fractional 2 pennies an hour increase. I think it was just an incorrect salary number indicated. So this article would bring her salary in fiscal 25 up 4% from fiscal 24, which is equal to what we saw collective bargaining units and other non-union folks get, and it would be retroactive to the July 1.
So do we have the can we go back and look at the actual kind of transcript of what we were supposed to vote? Was it a 4% increase? And it was a clerical error, or?
Yeah, town meeting voted what was in the motion, and just the prepared materials were incorrect.
So how can we go back and increase something that was voted by the town?
Because now the town is voting. You could set her salary to be $200,000 a year if you want, right? So the town is now voting to set the salary of elected officials with a retroactive date of July 1. So it's the same legislative body acting with the same authority.
Townspeople could say no. Right?
Right.
So, that would be awkward. The townspeople could say no. I would like to understand, I'd like to go back, I guess, Jeremy, if you could either go back to old collateral, or I will try to dig up old collateral of the budget that we voted on. I'd like to know what the expectation was and what was provided to us to vote on.
Right.
So the budget, interestingly, the budget is correct. We don't need a transfer to come up with the budget number. Well, let me backtrack. The budget includes a 2% COLA, which was what was initially anticipated when the budget was presented in the spring. And then the additional 2% was held in the reserve for negotiation in the select board account. So if you look at the budgeted salary for fiscal 23, for fiscal 24 versus fiscal 25 for town clerk, it will show a 2% increase. But the number that was voted at annual town meeting was in between those numbers. It was closer to a like 0.5% increase. It was a number that tied neither to budget nor toward prior year.
This is my memory of that we agreed to a 2% increase versus a 4% increase, because I think the ask was much higher than both 2 or 4%, and we came back with saying, from what I remember, and we could probably go back to the meetings that we reviewed this with the select board, that there were a number of ads and there were a number of requests, and we said, we can't give an increase of what was asked, so we gave the increase at 2%.
And that's what was in the budget, and that's not what was in the article to set the salary of elected officials.
Okay. Understood. So
how do we get to 4% here?
Right. That's exactly the next
Why
question.
is that say 4%?
Why is this not 2%?
Oh, because every collective bargaining agreement that we agreed to with town unions and every side letter of agreement that we have with non-union personnel is for a 4% COLA in fiscal 25. Select board can talk through their motives probably a little bit better tomorrow if you have specific questions, but all of the collective bargaining agreements are 2-year deals with COLAs of 4% and 3%, with the understanding that the town will enter into a compensation and classification study that looks at our both labor market and then our competitors in terms of comparables, and addresses both, like I said, compensation and classification for every position in town. And that's actually something we've already signed a contract for. We allocated American Rescue Plan Act money to sign a contract, and that process is underway. So the thesis was that the unions took a shorter deal with some kind of more upfront money to say, we understand and largely agree that a number of positions across town government are either misclassified or miscompensated, but give the town some time to find that out for sure. And this is our stopgap measure.
So what happens at town meeting if this does not get approved?
Then the town clerk.
Yeah.
So the town clerk would see her take-home pay essentially be less in fiscal 25 than fiscal 24, because other deduction, health insurance has gone up, and so her actual take-home each week was less in July than it was in June.
Yeah. So we voted on a budgeted salary for the position with the 2% COLA raise. There was also a budgeted line item reserved for negotiations with the union across the board. That's where the money came from. We approved that budget. That's where this money came from, to say, to apply a 4% COLA across the board. Is that correct?
We're going to get to that a little bit later. It requires about an additional $35,000 on top of that, but yes.
Okay.
So I guess why, my question is, why is this coming out of free cash then? This was budgeted and negotiated.
It's
Why
not, this is not an appropriation. This is to set a compensation level. So it's not asking for an appropriation.
So this is just to approve the salary.
Correct. This salary will be, there's kind of a waterfall effect to how I used the reserve for negotiation across departments. But this will be essentially functionally will be 100% taken care of through the reserve for negotiation. And if you want to think of it a little bit more complicated, half of it will be taken care of through the reserve for negotiation, which is already budgeted, the 2%, and then the additional 2% will be taken care of through an appropriation from free cash. But this article is just to set the compensation for the town clerk.
But why is the 2% coming from free cash and not what was originally budgeted?
Oh, right. So unions are different than non-union. So we didn't budget the 2% that's a good question. The 2% was not budgeted for unions, right? We don't want to kind of give away the negotiating position. So the unions were budgeted flat year to year, and the whole percentage was put in reserve for negotiations. In non-union positions, we budgeted 2%. And so that will be taken care of just from budget. That's right. And then the additional 2% is what we're asking for free cash in a later article.
Okay, so we had budgeted a 2% increase for the salary, and we approved that. There is a reserve for negotiation with union employees that we approved. So there's a set amount in there, right? We approved that line item. This ask is to align a non-union employee with the raises that were provided through the negotiation of union employees.
Yeah, we don't, through fair bargaining practices, we cannot directly tie one compensation to the bargaining unit and the other. But practically, and we say this out loud, what we do for one, we do for everybody in a negotiation like this. So other non-union personnel, so every other non-union person you can think of, myself and most other department heads, have our compensation agreed to with a select board vote. But because this person is elected, their compensation is set by a town meeting vote. So
Right.
Other non-union personnel already have a 4% increase for fiscal 25.
Okay.
And that's budgeted.
It will be after the free cash appropriation. Part of it was essentially the 2% was budgeted for each of them, and then an additional 2% is asked for in a free cash appropriation.
The select board is asking us to increase the town clerk's compensation 2% more than what we did previously, because we have the opportunity to do so. And
But it sounds like not just the town clerk, you're saying all non-union.
No, but that's separate. But I think that this is different because she's elected, correct? The town clerk's
Correct.
elected. Right.
Correct.
I think so in other words, the select board on the others have to budget that. It's not gonna be coming out of free cash, correct? It's gonna be budgeted for the others. This is unique because it has to go before the town because the town clerk's elected position.
It is unique that it has to go before the town because of that. But it is my understanding that the fiscal 25 budget did not contemplate a 4% COLA across the board, which is why we require a free cash appropriation later.
So funding that out of a non-reoccurring source.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
So
Yeah.
how are we gonna do it next year?
Yeah.
How do we need that money
That was what I was.
next year if our free cash
Right.
isn't the same?
So that's part of
Free
the,
cash is less.
so that's part of,
Been a long-standing philosophy you don't fund programs out of
Yeah.
one-time windfalls.
I think that's a great approach. I think in this situation, we can see that we have some structural surpluses in terms of the way we budget various things. So just with cannabis excise tax, like I said, cannabis sales tax, like I said, just even budgeting that in fiscal 26 kind of takes care of these revenues. And to do that with meals tax, to do that with building permits, to do that with a few other things where I think we can sharpen our pencil a little bit, so to speak, creates structural balance rather than these perceived one-time revenues, which I think are actually recurring revenues through the local receipts.
So let me ask my other board members here, and maybe I missed some meetings, so I'm not saying that, you know, I attend all the meetings, so it might have been discussed. But are we aware that when we say that we're raising someone's salary by 2%, that isn't a real number? That 2% is part of the number, and then there's another percentage that's going to be added on after the fact that we don't know. Have we been aware of that? Because I don't remember those discussions.
No, my understanding, I don't believe that there was another line item of reserve for negotiations with non-union employees of which the select board can dish out as they please, essentially.
I had assumed, and maybe wrongly so I just want to ask my other board members if they remember this differently, that when we agreed to salary increases, I assumed it was a real number rather than it was just a portion of the salary increase.
So I think you need to separate the union and non-union.
Speaking for non-union employees.
Speaking for non-union employees, my understanding was we were setting their salaries for the next fiscal year and that was it.
That was my understanding,
That was my understanding, what Mike just said.
Yeah.
Has it been the practice to give the non-union employees what was negotiated with the union contracts each time?
I do not recall those discussions nor anything occurring where salaries have been changed post-meeting or gone through approval of this board to change those salaries to align non-union raises with the union raises.
Let me say that I do remember, and by the way, you're correct.
I don't recall.
No, I don't recall either, but I do remember Kim mentioned, the reason why is I asked a question, one of us asked a question at one of the FinCom meetings when we were there, asking about, it had to do with benefits, how it was, and her response was, well, our employees don't get paid as much and don't get the same raises as the union ones, so therefore we have to entice them with more benefit. In other words, that, I remember her distinctly saying that, to answer your question, that I don't remember that either. I don't, you know.
So I mean, I think it's, you know, an area for discussion to understand, like, when we talk about salary increases, are the numbers real?
Yeah.
Right? And if there is a standing policy to match kind of increases to the union, that it should be budgeted. And it shouldn't be a free cash item that we look to kind of fund after the fact. And I understand that we want it, like, you can't tip your hat to how much we're gonna put because of the negotiation, but we gotta figure out a better way than pulling from free cash to do salary increases, in my opinion.
I will say the years that contracts expire are a little bit more difficult, right? Next year, so for fiscal 26, you'll see 3% for everybody, and that will be really apparent, and that won't change between, you know, April and October, because we have contracts. Kind of to the point where you said about, you know, attracting non-union folks. If we gave a 4% raise to union folks and a 2% raise to department heads, we'd have either a mutiny or a morale issue or an exodus, which we've had a similar.
For me, it's less an issue of the particular number. It's more an issue around kind of transparency around what are we agreeing to and what are we deciding on and where is it going to be budgeted.
I mean, I feel like the additional at the end is something that needs to come through this board.
I agree to that.
Yeah.
Now, so from what I'm hearing, my thought process is, because it was a negotiation year, it made it a little more difficult to put a number, a percentage raise on the because we're not on the non-union health.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where the variable is.
Right.
What he just said is, for the next, it's a 3-year contract, so next year and the year after, just to pick a number, if they were promised 3%, everybody across the board, the non-union help would get that 3%, because it's already, to keep it, what he said, keep it fair across the board.
Yeah.
So why are we, doing salary increases for non-union employees? Why don't we just negotiate the union employee deal and then kind of back into the non-union?
For budget setting purposes, we need to come up with a number, right?
But the number's not real.
If
we're saying,
I know,
if we're going to
it's,
town meeting and saying that the town clerk or any other position is getting a 2% increase, and then come to find out, well, it's not really 2%.
So, comparison by extremes, right? The union comes back and says, you get we negotiated a 15% increase. Does that mean we all of a sudden need to, like, automatically give up 15% to every non-union employee here? That's what it sounds like is the practice of the town, right?
If I can give 2 points of context, one, this is a 2-year deal, not a 3-year deal. I didn't want to interrupt before, but with the point that there's this compensation and classification study that we see at the end of this. So this contract goes to fiscal 25 through fiscal 26. We would expect, as we start to negotiate within fiscal 26, to say fiscal 27 is not going to be everybody gets the same sort of deal. We're going to take this study, which we're working with union and non-union folks to kind of set the parameters of. So we set the expectations, and we all agree before the outcome happens, and then we take the outcome of this study and say that's how the classification and compensation gets applied. So perhaps we see one union or another with, a small percentage COLA, another one with the same COLA, but a market adjustment. And then the non-union folks get kind of bespoke things to put them where, where we think either that individual or that position should exist within the study. So I wouldn't say it's the universal practice to say whatever a union gets, the non-union gets. That was the practice this time to kind of get us to a market reset for the next contract.
What's the population breakdown, just for context?
Of what? Sorry.
The employee population, how many non-union, how many union employees for the town?
Well, we have the police union with a dozen or so, the fire union with a little bit less, highway with 5, the town hall union has, I want to say 7 or so. It's a number of positions across different supervisory and non-supervisory. And then non-union is probably another maybe 10.
Heavily union.
Yeah, certainly.
So I guess my perspective is, I agree it's not the number and the percentage, it's more of the process here. So I would like to understand better how we are transitioning through these decisions and involving this committee before some of those decisions are made. If they need to be done not as part of public meeting, then let's do that as not a public meeting. However we go about doing those things. But I think this committee needs to be more on board and understanding what we're voting on, because the next point, that 2% number technically meant nothing that we voted on.
Right.
So
That's the issue for me. It's not the 2 or 4%.
yeah, and what the townspeople voted on meant nothing.
Well, right, and now here we're going back. That's why it's done at the annual.
Yeah.
When 90% of the people attended.
Yeah.
Where especially, most people could care less about. So shows the impression that, oh, don't go through the annual, we'll slip it through in a special.
For people, who want to make a big deal of this, yeah, people could make a big deal and see it as trying to sneak something through when there's less, attendees and less eyes on it, right? So I don't like the approach, I don't like the process that was used to get here. I would probably have less agita around it if this was simply correcting, the mistake that happened at town meeting, and that was 2% what we voted on. The fact that it's higher leaves me with concern of how we are transitioning through this process. I get that this is an anomaly that happens during a contract negotiation year. So I think we should prepare ourselves how to better navigate this space in 2 years when the next contracts come up.
So the kind of the realpolitik version of this is that the select board agrees to the parameters of the contract, and then town meeting can be able to essentially funds the contract with the transfers that are required. So if all the contracts are subject to appropriation. So if town meeting doesn't approve the appropriation, then the contract's not funded, and we have to go back to the drawing board. So these are not set in stone. Town meeting still has an ability to reject this, and it was in good faith, me at the bargaining table under select board's policy directives, and then select board agreeing to it. But it's all subject to appropriation, and select board doesn't have appropriating power. So kind of with that lens, I'm actually going to change how I presented the funding of it, and rather, I said I did a waterfall approach where I just used the reserve for negotiation for the first part of the departments in the general ledger, and then I asked for the full appropriation for the next part of departments. What I'm instead going to do is use the appropriation proportionately across departments, and then ask for a free cash appropriation proportionally into each department. So if the vote doesn't succeed and we have to go back, we're treating each union and non-union equally rather than just where they tend to fall in the general ledger. So I would just want to say it's not set in stone. There still is the appropriating ability from town meeting, but the folks at the negotiation table kind of operated in good faith, and we would have to go back and start all over with these folks.
Okay.
So what are we gonna do here, though? I guess that's the question.
Well, I think we need to have a conversation with the select board tomorrow night about this and try to get a better understanding of. I mean, that's my take on it, but. I agree. I understand the positioning, so something's gotta be done with the non-union help. Right. When we set salaries and wages, because again, this board, the select board, the town fathers, we're part of that group, presented to the taxpayer this, and this, and here we are changing it.
Right, that's the issue. And it could be my lack of knowledge, so but I thought what we presented was the increase for the year. And come to find out, it's not the increase. It's not fully the increase for the year. So I just think we need to be transparent to the taxpayers when if this is the process that we're going to continue to have, to say that this is potentially a portion of their increase. It may be increased more based on the union negotiations.
I think that was the intent of the intent of select board. Again, I wasn't here, but I think the intent was, a 2%, and that was how we went into things. And then that for one reason or another was no longer tenable, and didn't kind of get us anywhere. Like I said, I was only part of one of the union negotiations, not the other three, so I'm not quite sure. But it would be my intention, for what it's worth, to kind of be as forthright, and I need to balance a budget too, right? I need to present you a balanced budget, so I'm not going to advocate to the select board later on to agree to stuff that puts that budget out of whack. So it's in everyone's best interest to present the facts in the best manner as early as possible.
Yeah, I think at a minimum, like I think I should at least be contacted to figure out how to navigate this within our committee, right? So it's not like I had awareness of any of this that was going on in the background for me to at least be able to weigh in or have knowledge to be able to help set this committee at ease. So this is blind to all of us, right?
Has FinCom historically been involved in collective bargaining?
Yes. I've been involved with this town government for 30 years. I served as a selectman 2 terms. I've been on this committee for over 20 years. And that's the way we used to run things. Somehow it wandered off, but as I can see, we're getting back to this board being a more active participant.
Yeah, I will say for a little bit of a history lesson, in my short tenure here, I got to the point mentally where this board was essentially, could be replaced by an Excel spreadsheet, and if the number was black at the bottom, it got approved, and if it was red, it didn't get approved. So our role and input, a significant portion of the goings on of this town government has been very minimal. It has been slowly increasing, which has been a very positive direction. So I have not been involved in any of the negotiations and any of those pieces at all in my tenure, but those of us with more experience have seen different things, yeah.
Because
Nothing stays the same,
Right, yeah.
but to say that this board, just read the bylaws on the finance committee.
Yeah.
And it's self-explanatory. If we're not gonna do what the bylaws say, then we should be changing the bylaws.
Right, and to your point, the only thing I would disagree with you is that it should stay the same according to the bylaws. So it should have never changed to begin with.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. So when we're getting back to it, we're getting back to what we should have been doing prior.
Exactly. And again, instead of pointing fingers and blaming somebody,
it does. Let's just go.
carry on and now that we know better, we're gonna do that.
right, the reason I asked that question is because the bylaws talk about, you know, FinCom's role in providing recommendations on warrant articles, kind of being advisory in nature, and I've pushed back at select board members themselves being involved, like at the negotiating table. So if it was this board's intention to be involved in negotiations, I would also state my opposition. I think your request to be, you know, kept abreast, even in executive session, as to where we're at and what we're doing is more than reasonable. I just wanted to make sure I understood what the ask was here.
Yeah, I'm not advocating to absolutely be at the table in negotiations. I am more looking for transparency and knowledge of the goings on of the, you know, where money is going, right? So as of right now, it would be difficult for me to go to town meeting and say that I recommend doing something that I didn't vote for originally, right? If the intent of this is to fix a clerical error, then that's great. I can support that. If the intent of this is to give somebody a raise because, well, now we have a windfall of one-time funds, I'm not sure that I can totally support that, right? So
I will say these 4% COLAs were agreed to the union, to all but one union, and to all the non-union personnel before the certification of free cash.
But it doesn't sound like that is what happened at the ATM though, correct?
that's not what happened at the ATM. This all has to do after the certification, right before certification of free
Yeah.
cash. So, my issue with this right now is the fact that the committee is in the blind about how we are paying people.
Right.
Does it have to be an exact number? Do you vote on this number every year? Like,
For
could it
elected
be-
officials, for elected officials, yes.
You can't do like a range.
No, and so I tried a number of ways to at least get the town clerk a 2% COLA, what was kind of intended by the motion and clerically done incorrectly at annual town meeting. But was advised that went against the spirit of went against both the spirit and the letter of what was voted, and to not try to kind of come up with another way to get to 2%. So I found a couple different times that for elected officials, we are tied in very specifically to the number voted at town meeting.
What if, so here's a proposal, feel free to shoot this down. We have 2 articles, I hate adding articles, but you have an article to fix the clerical error at 2%, and then you have another article to increase the 4% to align with the other. That way it's not all rolled into one. People understand we need to, 1, fix the clerical error, and 2, we're going to align non-union employees with union employee negotiations.
Right, but the one thing that's different is it happens to be a she's an elected official. By rights, she herself could get up on the town meeting floor and advocate for 6%, right, 7%. It's happened before. Right.
Which she has.
You know what I mean? So the only way to fix that, or put a check on that, is to make her a town employee, not an elected official, which did not pass. They tried that a couple of years ago. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think the highway surveyor now is an employee of the town, not an elected official. Is that right?
I believe so, yeah. Yes.
So they're all employees. He's appointed, not elected.
Right. Where before it was elected, and he had the opportunity to go up and speak to the townspeople at the annual town meeting when we talked about and advocate for his own pay, regardless of what anybody else was getting paid.
Right.
Hmm?
Did it work?
That was my question.
Yes, it did.
The town clerk has advocated for a salary different from this 4% to kind of account for the steps that unions get, right? Non-union folks don't get steps like union folks do. So oftentimes union folks will get a COLA and then also a step increase within a year, depending on where they fall on the seniority schedule, whereas non-union folks don't get that. So the town clerk was advocating for inclusion of a number higher than 4%. I imagine this number will be up for debate at select board tomorrow. It's a select board sponsored article. But I thought it was most consistent, and it was my interpretation of select board's will, at least, to have 4% consistent with the rest of non-union staff.
So with what you just said, the actuality is it could wind up being more. Because what I believe you just said was she's got a different idea of what she wants.
I mean,
correct? Didn't you just say that?
Yeah, she had advocated for that. She had
Different
advocated for
number,
that in advance of annual town meeting in the spring as well. It was my understanding, and the select board said, we're going to treat you the same as other non-union employees, under the guise of, or not under the guise, under the expectation that the compensation and classification study that we were engaging with would kind of correct for those ills, if there were any.
Right. So that's fine. Like if this study comes back and says we need to make adjustments in order to be competitive and, align better with what's going on in the world, that's one piece of information. I have enough information about the point of this article. Mm-hmm. I have everybody's opinion on where we are in this. I have concerns around the processes we're using around setting salaries of non-union employees in years of contract negotiation that I would like addressed with the select board. I would like to make the recommendation that we actually break this article up into 2. One where we fix the clerical error that happened and people are allowed to vote for that. I personally can easily support that. And then have a second article which then says move it from 2% to 4% to align non-union employees with union employees, and the select board can vouch to the reasoning to the townspeople of why they want to go forward with that, and we can all vote on our recommendation on whether to support that or not.
Well, see, there's one more thing that, because it's an elected position.
But she's not the only elected, right?
No, but this is the only issue. is with this particular position.
But the
It's
other
elected.
elected's additional 2% was never voted on.
Well, they
Am
must
I
have,
following that?
they agreed to it. It's,
So the
when
only,
you-
she's the
when
only,
you run
she's
to
the,
that position, you know all about it. This is what I'm gonna run for this position, this is what it pays. Right? So basically, when you decide to run, you're agreeing to that stipulation. These are my duties, this is what I get paid. Versus non-union help, they're told, you want the job, here's what it pays. Okay, we go through these steps, where the step that he's talking about that they're gonna upgrade and relook at is all part of the negotiation deal, whether you're union or not. This is an elected position. I wanna be president of the United States, the job pays $400,000 a year. You know what you're getting into. You follow what I'm saying?
the
So-
town clerk is the only elected full-time employee in town. The other elected salaries, town moderator, select board is set at $2,000 a year. Moderator, I think, is $100 or $200 a year. So the town clerk is the only position that's full-time and elected. And it's not quite accurate to say when you run, the salary is going to be, because the annual town meeting can change your salary from, $69,000 a year to $19,000 a year, if that's what annual town meeting does. So it's not that you have a base and then annual town meeting votes on your increases. Annual town meeting votes on the absolute number of your salary each year,
Well,
even within your
Sorry.
term. Sorry, even within your term. So it's not like they set your salary for the term. It can be cut drastically by town meeting after one runs for office.
Well, I think we should probably have a discussion around this with the select board tomorrow night to understand if there's something that we're missing that we, for whatever reason, don't understand.
And what happened, that's what I would be good, right, just.
Try to get a little bit more information.
Yeah, I mean, I would say everybody involved has been very good on increased transparency when we have pressed on it and said, hey, there's a gap or something missing. So I'm confident we will be able to work through this. I just want to highlight that there is a concern of how we are transpiring through the process of setting salaries after FinCom has voted on a recommendation to the town, right? So I am concerned, as Nick brought up, that we are telling the town, we recommend you vote 2%. And then it becomes 4 in the middle of the night at some point, and we had no idea.
Right, and was that disclosed, and was it disclosed, and we missed it, or I missed it? Because I don't remember that there was that discussion.
Yeah, and if it was had with me and I don't recall, it is what it is. I don't have the best memory,
Right.
but I would like to understand better how we can improve this process for better transparency and involvement of this committee as we go through these pieces. I still would like to noodle with the select board on the proposal of breaking up the article into 2 pieces to allow the town to see them both for what they are.
But we have to find out what happened.
Yeah, but I think both,
Yeah.
one is, for me, one is not dependent on the other.
No, I agree with that, but I'm just saying, I right now, I just wanna know what happened, and that's,
I agree.
it was 2%, and then they didn't get it, and now we want 4%.
We're all in agreement that we need to find out,
Find out what happened.
understand these processes.
Yeah.
And what can we do to improve the involvement of this committee and the transparency of when these things happen,
Right.
right?
Is this a one-time only situation, or is this something that has been standing and we've missed it?
Yeah, I mean, select board is the policy-making board for the municipality, and then town meeting's the legislative, right? So it was a select board policy to execute these contracts and needs town meeting approval to ultimately fund portions of them. And then it's this committee's role to be, to advise the legislative branch on these. So
Also, our job is to advise the taxpayer, the people that are funding this.
We make recommendations to.
To the we're supposed to analyze and say, hey, this is a good deal, we're getting the best bang for the
Right.
buck, to put it in payment.
Or we have concerns.
Right.
Right, and if we know if we rewind the clock, if we had an understanding that, okay, we can vote to recommend the 2% increase, knowing full well through transparency and through, what needs to be a closed door discussion to not taint negotiations, what that actually means at the end of the day, then we go into it with a clearer conscience of saying, hey, we know what's going on. This is why we're part of the committee, is to advise the townspeople, you should support this, right? As of right now, we go into it thinking 2% and it's going to be 2%. Well, we just recommended 2%, it's going to be 4%. Right, so again, it's about the transparency and the understanding.
Yeah.
If anybody reviews this meeting, these notes and this video, this is not about the actual dollar value or whether we believe that, the town clerk should or should not get the raise.
Right, that's not the issue.
That is not the issue at all. This is simply about how the select board is working through these pieces of the negotiation without the involvement of this committee ahead of time.
Yeah, and the understanding for the folks at the annual town meeting who are voting, what they're
Right.
voting on.
Yeah.
Right, or what they assume they're voting on.
Right, because a lot of people only go to the ATM.
And there are folks who pay very close attention who will say, well, didn't we vote 2%?
Yeah.
Well, why is this now 4%? Where did this come out of left field, right? And then this discussion now happens on the town meeting floor, and I don't think the select board wants that to happen.
I think members of the select board who span both annual town meeting and now may be able to give a better kind of TikTok than I have been on this, just because I came in really late in it. I'm
That's why we'll bring
confident
it up
that.
tomorrow.
Quite frankly, I think you're doing a very well job, being thrown into the game at such a late date, so don't.
Don't cut yourself short.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's rascals.
If you make it through us, then you got no problem.
I'm going to recommend that we move on from this one and we continue discussions tomorrow with the select board.
Okay, so next, I think that's a good place to leave it. The next is about the debt exclusion for the Mendon Senior and Community Center. So we are, I'm reviewing with town council, and town council sent me language not long before this meeting. I haven't reviewed it yet about this highlighted bit here. So whether we want it to be contingent upon the passage, that's a part that I'm trying to wordsmith with town council. But essentially this is asking for the debt exclusion. It will be an interesting question, if this passes or not on the 5th, on how this is treated on the 18th. But the anticipation is that the motion will say debt exclusion and borrowing of up to $11.95 million, down from the $13.2 million asked for at annual town meeting.
And the verbiage, other than the amount, needs to be changed because of the cadence of the election happening before the town meeting.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different outcomes here. It passes on the ballot, and then we come to town meeting, and we don't want to say contingent upon because it already passed. Or do we want to, if it fails and we do a language that says contingent upon, does that mean a contingent upon a future vote because of the verbiage? Or if we take out contingent upon and it fails on the 5th, does that mean we can use this authorization to go to a ballot later? It's all questions for town council right now. So I think the prevailing wisdom is to take out the contingent upon, since the election that this is related to happens first. But I'm still trying to get a little clarity on that before this is finalized.
What is the intent of I don't know the intent of the select board. Let's assume this fails at a town election. You could just have this be worded assuming success, and then the select board simply passes over this if it fails. Right?
Yeah, that's my prevailing estimation, or what I think would happen. But I think that's a great question for select board tomorrow. I wouldn't last long in this job if I tried to read all their minds. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not sure their total intent.
Okay.
But I think everyone understands the exclusion and how that works.
Yeah.
This is a bylaw on open meeting. These are submitted by the Board of Assessors for various exemptions for veterans, which were enabled by state changes in state law. These are trail easements. The planning board has not the planning board, but the select board, I guess, has the zoning bylaw review committee, which consists of some members of the planning board, ZBA, other folks, and is being assisted by the Central Mass Regional Planning Coalition, CMRPC. I think that's what the last C stands for, and state law changes in allowing accessory dwelling units. So it's our enabling bylaw that's here. Now we're getting into free cash appropriations. So these are broken down a little thematically. I also got some verbiage changes from town council on how the motion should actually read. So the final packet will look a little bit different, but what we're talking about now is the concept and the dollar amount. So these are vehicles and related equipment. I always say and related equipment because I don't want the motion to say the vehicle and then they're not allowed to buy, radios or lights or something for it. So I always say vehicles and related equipment. So the highway's in desperate need of street sweeper. Theirs is kind of on their last legs, and there's a 1-year lead time to get this sort of thing. It's been on the capital plan. So you hear this a lot tomorrow about the capital plan and about the town's experience both last year and this year in capital planning and our designs on what capital planning looks like going forward. So it will be just a regular part of our budgeting process that we say highway says we need this for salaries, this for services, this for supplies. And then next to that saying, here's stuff we need to replace this year, next year, the next 5 years after that. It's just they're going to be integrated. They're not quite right now, but it's in a better spot now than it was previously. So the street sweeper was on the fiscal 26 capital project list, but they need it in fiscal 26. And with the year lead time and the availability of free cash, we advanced it into using free cash here.
That's a capital expenditure, that should be at annual town meeting. Not a special town meeting.
Why would we wait?
Is the highway department going to be presenting the rationale around this?
To select board and you tomorrow or at town meeting?
To the select board and to us.
They have to the capital improvement working group. I can make sure that that's part of tomorrow's as well.
Kind of the 11th hour, I think.
No, so the highway department has been talking about the need to replace the street sweeper for at least a year.
Over a year.
Yeah.
We went through this, I was gonna say, that's not what we put
Yeah, I think
the engine in.
we bought a super expensive engine
right.
for it because it was like it was really old and it was only one type of engine existed or something.
So what happened to that?
Yeah.
No, that's why I'm asking, because it's a 1950. That's
Yeah.
1950, and I remember asking the question.
Right, I think
2 years ago.
we appropriated
Yeah.
the funds for it. I think that they were able to fix it, but
It broke again.
I believe so.
Yeah.
So there's supposed to be, I don't think this is at the 11th hour, it's the 11th hour for this committee, but the capital improvement working group is supposed to be giving a presentation tomorrow at the select board meeting. So
My point is, it's a capital expenditure, should be at an annual town meeting, not a special town meeting.
So you say that because of the typical attendance of annual versus special?
Yeah.
So I agree, we should have more people involved. The lack of attendance for a special town meeting, I don't think, there are times where we need to take action. If the townspeople don't want to pay attention, that sucks. This is why we are here.
It's a slippery slope.
It is a slippery
No, but
slope.
I agree with what Mike's saying, though.
It is a slippery slope.
It's a slippery slope, but by the same token, I agree with you that if they don't show up and this passes, they shouldn't complain if they weren't there.
Well, we got a senior center that's what, $12 million that's on the,
Yeah, I fully expect this special town meeting to be well attended,
Right.
so.
Was that appropriation brought up at the last annual town meeting?
No.
Okay, so it's new to the people. Let's compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. Yeah, the senior center has come before us again, but the original thought process on the senior center was approached at an annual town meeting. That has not been. But here we are at a special town meeting trying to okay a $300+ appropriation at a special town meeting
But
that nobody knows anything about.
I'm suspecting it's because it broke again, right? Between the annual town meeting and now. I'm just suspecting that, or there's something wrong with it.
Well, I don't know, it was the first we're hearing of it.
No, we heard about it before when they asked about the engine, when they wanted to when we transferred the FinCom reserve
Right.
a year ago. Maybe.
That's asking for a new.
This is asking for, right, but I guess what I'm saying, I think the reason why this is showing up, I'm just suspecting, is that if you talk to them at the highway department, we can, is that they probably don't have one right now, or do they? I don't know.
They have one. So we're under the obligation for our stormwater permit, I think it's our MS4, MSW4, something like that, to sweep each street once a year. It's best practice to do it twice a year. We have not been able to do it once a year in the last handful of permit years until this past year, just by timing of how fiscal years work. But because our street sweeper has been inoperable for, large swaths of when we would street sweep. This has become...
They're not gonna sweep the street after November 1st, okay? It's winter. You don't sweep streets in the wintertime, you throw salt and sand down.
Right, but Mike,
Like I said
it was
before,
a
there's a
1 year lead time in order to get, so based off of when the need was, right? So there's a need for a piece of capital equipment, it has a long lead time. So the ask is to be putting it in now to take care of the lead time to get it for when it believes to be necessary.
Right.
So I agree that part of the capital improvement working group's presentation should be the detail behind why this is needed now and, or why it's needed for fiscal year 26 and getting it in now to be able to have it for fiscal year 26 instead of waiting for fiscal year 26 to put in for the money, because that was the working group's.
Yeah,
but I would ask the question, and to the highway department, just to understand from our standpoint, if the goal is to sweep the streets, sweep every street once a year, is that something that the town can outsource? Is that, since it's not like we're using this every day for, it's a backhoe, it's a plow, it's something that we're gonna be using all the time. If it's every street once a year, is this something that the town could outsource either to a vendor to do once a year? And what's the cost of that versus the capital cost? Or is it something that we can rent?
We asked that exact question when we.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
I was just about to say that.
I don't remember the answer.
I think I know the answer, because that was asked, and I don't know who asked it.
I asked it.
Did you ask? Okay.
Yes.
But I remember the answer on that, I believe, and it was Kim who gave it, or it might even be Mike Marola, anyways, and it made sense. It said the problem with outsourcing it was that the timing issue. In other words, you can't.
Everybody's using the street sweeper when they
Exactly. In other words, they said
when they're
everybody.
available.
Right, they said everybody, most towns around here, for example, in central Massachusetts, would sweep the streets between, I'm just throwing it out, March 15th and May 1st. And they said that's what the issue was. So let's say we say we're gonna sweep the streets the third week of April, and it pours that weekend. What do? You see what I'm saying?
No, but like, it's my ignorance, this is not my area of specialties for my career, so I don't understand about street sweepers and companies that offer that service. But have we at least gone out and looked to see are there companies that do this for other municipalities? I don't know, yes or no. And what do they charge per mile, right? And what would the cost benefit of buying versus, hiring a vendor to do it?
Yeah,
And-
and we
have you
hire
done
out for
that?
some things like cleaning catch basins in the same rationale, right? The big capital expenditure, and if we can have a vendor do it instead. I just want to make sure street sweeping is not like, it's not like we pick a week and we say we're going to sweep all the streets. It takes weeks, and it takes kind of, I don't know that I want to say months, because again, highway's kind of not my area of expertise either. But it's a ongoing and seasonal long thing. It's not like a discrete activity you do for a week. So I think the contracting piece becomes a little more difficult on that, and that you'd be paying contractor wages for a large swath of time.
It's just like kind of tree removal, right? We contract a tree removal company to do tree removal on kind of roads, right? We don't do that in-house, as I understand it. We do maybe do some, but we have a contract that does that we anticipate what we need and we put it out to bid or however it works, and we have someone who does that. So I'm not saying that that's the solution. I really don't know. I'm just wanting to know, have we asked that kind of question, and have we done kind of?
The last time we asked that question and we received an answer, I don't remember the details unfortunately, but we were okay with the answer and found it reasonable. But that was also in the context of fixing the specialized motor, not buying a brand new machine to replace what is a 1950s piece of equipment, right?
And what was the life
1955, I remember that.
Yeah.
And you appropriated it last year?
Huh?
Did they give you the life expectancy of fixing it last year?
That's a sore subject with me anyways.
I have no idea what the current status is, so I would suggest that, what's his name, John, right? He's, highway surveyor.
I haven't met him.
So I would suggest that John be here tomorrow. We should invite him to talk through the details about the street sweeper. Or make sure that the capital improvement working group includes the details. I should just look it up right now to see if it's in the presentation.
It's not in the presentation, but I just asked the surveyor all those questions. So if he's not available tomorrow, I'll make sure I have the answers for you.
All right, perfect.
Yeah. You can rent equipment, same as manhole cleaning, catch basin cleaning.
This is your business.
Yeah.
This is your line of work.
Right.
You think I send laborers down in there? I call the company and says, hey, blah, blah, come up, I got 18 catch basins I need you to suck out.
Right, and I just want to remind
Sweep people over and sweep them.
I want to remind the committee, we asked this exact question.
Yeah, we did. We went over
And
all
we
this.
were accepting of the answer that was provided at the time. Granted, it was in different context of how much we were going to spend.
Right, this is
Right.
a different ask, so we asked the question again.
Right.
Yeah,
And I think the question, because I asked it, the question was, what would it cost to rent? That was the question I asked versus what would it cost to have a vendor do it?
right, and I remember what
Yeah.
Ron was talking about, it was in terms of in the area, the availability of that equipment based off of who already assumes renting of their equipment. They are already spoken for and used, and by the time we would get them,
Well,
it's way beyond.
we're planning a year out here now.
Right,
So we
but-
have the opportunity to maybe look at,
Right.
this isn't a
So,
meeting.
yeah,
We could look at it again because it is early. To your point there, it was in April, I think, so I agree with you. But
I'm not saying we don't ask the question.
yeah, we
just
can ask the
wanted-
questions, but I do believe that you're gonna find that it's not.
Yeah, and it's more that I wanted that, and I assume that they have asked these questions and we just don't have the detail.
Yeah,
That's the assumption that I have, that these people have already asked these questions, have come to the rationale, this is the best way to do it. But that should be presented to us so that we can, as we're making a recommendation to the town, we can have these questions already answered. And we can say, yes, this is the best proven way to spend this versus.
Just so that it's clear with the rest of the members, I might not be able to make it to express so I'm letting you know. I believe that should be on an annual town meeting warrant. So you rent out one more year, put that before in May.
right, so
And
we can,
instead of
so Bill,
pushing
we
it
should,
through a special town
I
meeting
want to record that,
with 10 people sitting there.
right, so
It's on there.
So Mike's opinion is that large expenditures have to be on an annual town meeting because of attendance issues, we have a special town meeting. So
I do have a question though. So what happened this past spring? Were they able to use the one they have?
We didn't get all this. We didn't get all the street swept. I
So
believe
just, it just completely,
it wasn't 0% of streets,
This
but
is-
as I understand it, it was not 100% of streets because
You're correct.
it was inoperable.
we appropriated a certain amount of money to
Yeah.
be able to fix the motor,
fix the motor.
right? It sounds like the motor was fixed. That was still a patchwork, right? That was still a patch to be able to continue the utilization of a piece of equipment from the
70 years old.
1950,
50,
right?
yeah, 5-0.
So at some point,
Well, this could be a good deal for the last 70 years, right?
right, exactly. So, at some point, things need to be replaced.
You know what was sold
It
to us
sounds
though?
like we threw good money after that.
Well, let me tell you something, Mike, that's exactly what I said, and I'm gonna tell you, and I think it was actually Mike Rowley who said this. He said, they don't make them like they used to, and, this is a really good one, and I said, I'm afraid that we put I'm afraid we're gonna put the engine in, you remember this? And I said, and then you gotta come to us a year or two later that says, oh, it's not the engine, but it's the, the transmission, or something. Do you know what I'm saying? In other words, because this person put it in.
It put us a year behind.
Yes, and I even said the same thing, like, if you're doing it, let's budget to buy another one, patch it for a couple of years, but now they're coming up, and I agree with you, the more I think of this, to put it in November, this should go before more people, it really should.
Well, then I would suggest that the town's members start attending special town meeting. That's
No,
what-
but I don't have that, I don't have a problem with that either,
Yeah. So, I have
Yeah.
no problem, like, it's not like we don't advertise, it's not like nobody knows that it's happening. It is out there, the information is there, they can be on FinCom meetings, they can be on select board meetings, they can be on the town moderator meetings where they talk about this stuff. That it goes through automatic email generation, it goes through free paper generation. The fact that townspeople don't attend is their problem.
The special town meeting, the annual town meeting is set in stone.
Yep.
Every year, it's the same time. Special town meetings are at the whim of the Board of Selectmen. Put it in caveman terms.
Is it usually the second or third on Monday? I thought of November.
And actually, this special town meeting is to, review this because of, certified free cash.
And it's coming after an election, which could be confusing.
So again, capital expenditures, in the history of the 40 years that I've been going, 40 annual town meetings are at an annual town meeting.
If we want to rally to make that a official policy of the town, then we can do that, right? There's nothing stopping this other than beliefs and feelings at the moment, right? So.
This is, go ahead, Jeremy, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we would, I just wanted to, before we got too many points away. So you talked about, we should kind of budget for a big expenditure like this, try to kind of limp along until we have our permanent solution and not throw good money after bad. And I think that's what we did. So the $50,000 for a new engine, I think that was a good faith effort in trying to extend the useful life of an expensive asset. It got us a little bit, but what we did here is we put it in the capital plan last year for fiscal 26. It's in the capital plan now for fiscal 26. We have cash on hand right now to make this investment and not continue to throw good money after bad by trying to limp along another year. So rather than
What we should do is vote to put $335,000 in a special account for further appropriation after it's approved at an annual town meeting. To save it to that, earmark it to that.
the equivalent of that is just to not appropriate at all and leave it in unrestricted fund balance, leave it in free cash.
Well, then it's up for grabs. So what I'm saying is, you take the 335, that's what it's gonna cost. You use this meeting to put it in a special account for further appropriation when we can present a capital need at an annual town meeting. And that's the money that's gonna pay for it. So when you go to the annual town meeting, hey, we need this, when we have that windfall of free cash, we put money aside for it to bring to you, the voters, at an annual town meeting to approve it. Which will go a lot further, saying, we saved the money here, and we're giving you the opportunity, which is the taxpayer's right, to vote on it.
Yeah, and we have 6 months.
I mean,
We have 6 months of opportunity cost. And then, special town meetings have the same legal authority to appropriate as an annual town meeting.
Right, which is why I'm making the point that there's no legal reason why we can't do this. This is a just, how do we believe we should approach it? And there are members of this committee who believe that because a special town meeting is not the same date every year, and maybe some folks find it difficult to attend, that it should be at the annual town meeting, of which we still get a pathetically low number of attendees.
We're not talking $100
I agree.
computer or whatever, we're talking a major capital expenditure.
I mean, to me, when you have a low turnout at these, it does invite more people to try and push things through, which we know. However, I'm just gonna play the devil's advocate and agree with, a bit with what Mike said, is if they don't show up, it's sort of shame on them. In other words, I can see an argument both ways, I really can.
Right.
And historically, I agree with you.
This is just about an approach.
There's hardly anybody at the ones in November. I mean, that's a fact.
I just go back to there's a $12 million item on there.
Right. There should be people at this one, I agree. I keep forgetting that, and I agree with you.
No, but I mean, even though it's been kind of brought up at the town meeting, it's coming back around at a special town meeting.
Well, all right, so let's poke at this then. You're on the Mendon Senior Community Center Committee. Do you believe that because we have a $12 million item, that we should have more people be able to vote on that? So we should push that out to the annual town meeting. So I want to test your resolve.
What I believe, number one, it failed, okay? The same way when overrides fail for the schools.
Yep.
And the school comes back.
Yep.
So if we allow the schools to come back.
Yeah, totally agree. It's completely within their own.
Okay.
It is.
This has not been presented at an annual town meeting and failed to bring back at a special. This is being pushed through at a special town meeting with no other.
I push back at the verbiage. I push back at the verbiage of pushed through. It's being presented through the regular process. I don't think there's anything kind of underhanded by us trying to.
I don't mean to say that. I'm talking in caveman terms here. You'll see when we get in front of a crowd of people, we tend to sophisticate our language a little bit better. But we're in a meeting here, and if anybody's watching, they've seen us in action before.
I understand that this is legal, Joe. I understand that. The issue I had with this is what I said originally is 18 months ago. Yeah. We discussed this. They wanted a FinCom. We use a FinCom reserve. I remember Kim got upset with me. This is exactly what it's for. No, I mean, I didn't want to put $10,000 towards a machine that was built in 1950. I remember that. And I said exactly what ended up happening. And I don't think I was any soothsayer. I mean, to me, it was a 70-year-old machine.
Right.
We're putting an engine that's $10,000. I don't know what, one guy knew how to do it. No, I mean it. I mean, you remember the whole conversation. And I think when I saw this, when I was looking at this, and I said to my wife, I said, I can't believe this. And she said, what? I said, the stupid street sweeper is on here. I said, we just, we spent, no, and I was really upset to even see this. And to your point, it is going to get, it is here legally, but it is, I'm sure, here because it is easier to push through. I agree with it.
It's not here because it's easier to push through. No. It's here because of the lead time. And so there's all right. So
okay, that's fine.
And if your point was that we should have,
right?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And this is the committee deliberation. I should address stuff through the chair. I apologize for interrupting what you're saying. I agree with your point in that this was something that 18 months ago you said, why are we putting money into a 70-year-old machine? And so now we're saying we don't want to any further put money into a 71-year-old machine now, right? Like, so this is, maybe it's a year and a half later than the committee would have liked to see, and that's quite possibly true. And so I wouldn't want to wait another 18 months now. or 6 months even now, which is why I advocated for its inclusion here. Just trying to make sure that my and select board's rationale at least is conveyed on this.
But I think to maybe Nick's point of the basis of it is that don't we need the full analysis to determine whether or not it's a yes recommendation or a no recommendation?
That's what I was gonna,
Whether it is in November or May.
Oh, yeah, it's
Right.
totally up to the head of this committee
Yeah.
to say, we don't recommend.
we don't
moving forward.
exactly, that's what I was gonna ask,
Yeah,
that's what I was gonna ask you.
just because it's here doesn't mean we can't say,
That's right.
we don't recommend moving forward with it, right?
And to your earlier point around kind of articles, should these be broken out as separate articles? The street sweeper, the cruiser, and the fire.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
That was
But
my
they will
next
be
thing I was gonna ask.
they will be separate motions. So there are some communities that put all their free cash. I live in Millis, and my first town meeting, all the free cash appropriated, there were 7 or 8 of them were in one article, and then they were separate individual motions. So it's kind of a stylistic approach that I tried to do it thematically, to make sure we don't have 32 articles and to kind of keep some things together. But they will be separate motions, and folks can vote on the street sweeper, on the police cruiser, and on the fire vehicle, all as separate entities.
So if it's a separate motion, then it should be a separate article? Article
it
14. And we're based on Article 14, the bottom line is $468,000.
So it can be, it doesn't have to be. So there will be separate motions within a single article.
I guess I've never seen us execute that.
I don't know that the town has.
Yeah, so I am not aware how we mechanically execute that because it's really no different than having them be separate articles of the mechanics of doing it.
I think it's comes down to the moderator communicating very specifically with each of these articles, saying, okay, because we're all gonna have a little buzzer, the first one is for this, the second, vote now, the second one, vote now, the third one, vote now. Now we go on to the next.
To me, the way it's written, we're voting on $468,000.
And that's how it
If
is.
you wanna break it out, then you've gotta, make a motion on the floor
No,
to break it out, to not include the 335, or whichever one. You gotta make a
My
motion on the floor.
suggestion, yeah.
Is that what you're suggesting, Jeremy?
under council had advised multiple items in a single article with multiple motions for each individual item. Each individual line item is, I wouldn't say universal practice, but is at least common practice amongst municipalities. And ultimately, this is not how the town has done it before. It's how I organize the warrant. And if the select board wants to, gives me feedback otherwise, because the select board tomorrow is discussing this, they've seen it before, but it's become more granular as it's gone on. So if they want to break out the warrant as individual line items, there's nothing inherently wrong one way or the other. This was my kind of stylistic choice as I put it together, but I'll take my cues from the select board.
But again, we've got to make a recommendation to the people if we're gonna support it. The money, the way the article's written.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we suggest, I guess Jeremy, suggest for tomorrow, we talk through the mechanics of how this is going to happen to ensure that we can make recommendations on individual line items instead of the bulk of the total article.
Okay. That's a fair question. And I want to make sure that the gist of this meeting, right, this was to familiarize you all with what the presentation would kind of be tomorrow to make tomorrow's discussion kind of more useful. So having this ahead of time without asking you to vote up and down one way or the other is useful to me. So thank you. On the other two, cruiser replacement and fire vehicle support, both chiefs will be at tomorrow's meeting. The police cruiser replacement. So Chief Kersey will do a much better job explaining this than I will. We have a cruiser replacement program, and that's built into our operating budget. We used ARPA to supplement it recently. But there are two vehicles, both the detective and the sergeant vehicle, which are kind of not in that rotation because they get used less, and we kind of take older cruisers and port those over there. So what this would do is kind of advance the replacement of a cruiser, which would then kind of trickle down to these two things that aren't in the cruiser replacement series. So in the cruiser replacement plan, as previously conveyed. So Chief Kersey, as he explains it to me, this is not the car's not it's not like the street sweeper where we're on our last legs, we're putting good money after bad. We have old, possibly in the future to be unreliable vehicles, and we're trying to make sure we have kind of accelerate our replacement of it because there is free cash available. So I think he's going to couch it as such. The number's up for debate. The inclusion of it's of course up for debate even from select board, but this was a request of a department head that I felt was germane to the use of free cash in the timing, the cadence that we had it. Whereas, go ahead.
Did this have to do with the chief's? I thought there was a discussion about him getting an electric F-150 because we wanted to be able to have him carry his equipment not in the cab with him and actually, have a functional cab.
So that's the fire one. So that what I just talked about was the cruiser.
That's the fire one.
Police
Okay.
cruisers, yeah. So the fire piece. So fire vehicle support one. So right now the fire chief has a SUV, a Tahoe, I think it is, or maybe an Explorer. I forget, but he has an SUV. The fire chief has turnout gear that he uses at fire incidences. Fire retardants are notoriously PFAS laden, and having a chief with an administrative vehicle where he carries his gear around within the same cab has become a health concern to the chief. Because he responds 24/7, there are occasions when he has his family in the vehicle as well, along with his gear. So he's uncomfortable with that. Other communities, kind of combat this by their, having larger departments where their fire chief doesn't have turnout gear in his car and isn't fighting fires. So what the chief has asked for, what Chief Bangma has asked for, is a separated compartment, just like Chair Krager just said about to keep a gear in the trunk, in the bed with a cap. So there is, yes, the question on electric versus internal combustion engine, and I think the motion can be written to specify one or the other. I got a quote literally this morning, so this number is not what I'm going to present tomorrow, but it was for $84,000 for the electric SUV, or for the electric pickup. I mean, there are roughly $7,500 worth of rebates available. And I'm exploring the Green Communities Act grant program, but I'm not sure that it would apply. I'm talking with Isabella, our conservation agent now, who is much better at this sort of thing than I am. And then the internal combustion engine would be about $7,000 less. So it would be in the $76,000 range for it kitted out in a way that an emergency vehicle needs to be. So the net to the town is roughly the same. The chief can talk tomorrow, but his preference, given the same net cost, would be to have the gas engine, the internal combustion engine, about access to charging stations, about needing prolonged response times at whatever event, or about having the range anxiety when he's on 24/7 kind of call and has to respond to something. So I think his request is going to be on the internal combustion engine, which still qualifies as a Green Communities vehicle by its anticipated miles per gallon for a public safety vehicle.
And is this fully rigged out? Includes all the radios, all the antennas? There's no additional, because sometimes we get something and then we need to get additional equipment.
Yeah, so that's why
does it come in with floor mats, everything?
Yeah, it has it's like a 3 or 4 page quote that has everything in it, right? The light bars, the radios, the everything like that. So I will of course confirm that before we actually purchase something. But that's what the estimate was based off of.
And I assume that's the same with the cruiser.
Correct. And they're both off of state contract through, I think it's VEH 110. I think it's the contract we use. So that's how we'll procure those. Next, so if you had gotten a chance to read my Providence Street culvert memo, which for everyone's edification, Providence Street Culvert, of course, washed out. Select Board was presented with 3 different options on how to replace it. A 4-sided concrete box culvert, a 3-sided concrete box culvert, or an aluminum culvert with concrete footing. Kind of went through the cost differences between all of them. After my research and talking with our consultant and the highway surveyor, I had recommended the 3-sided box culvert. The Select Board has not ultimately made a decision made a vote one way or the other. The overall project will cost, the 3-sided box culvert will cost roughly $2 million. The engineering cost is the same, relatively the same, regardless of what type of structure we end up going with. This project has roughly $100,000 worth of DOT grants available to offset engineering costs and $500,000 to offset construction costs. But you need design documents to be able to get those reimbursable grants. So this $300,000 requested here would be the seed money from the town to kind of get this project going on such an important roadway. People remember what it was like to detour when the road was closed. So to do a permanent solution here, to engineer a permanent solution. And then how my memo lays it out is, of course, it's just, my thoughts on it, but it would include using that capital stabilization fund we talked about earlier. It would use that $600,000 worth of grants. That together is, roughly $1.2 million, and then bonding for the rest, and getting that inside of Proposition 2.5. So budgeting in a way where we can afford debt service without needing a debt exclusion. So the incremental taxpayer impact of the debt would be 0. It would be within Proposition 2.5, within our regular levy. So that's my anticipation. I was really shocked to find out that the town has no debt inside of Prop 2.5, that everything is the debt exclusion. That is not unheard of, but it's uncommon to need a taxpayer impact and to need a ballot question vote for every bit of debt you borrow. One of my near-term goals, medium-term goals, is to get debt inside the levy, because then you can continue, as that debt falls off, you can continue to invest in your physical stock, in your fleet, in your roads, and your whatever, and not have that bit of your budget be eaten up by salaries and services. You keep that as a capital investment each year, and then folks who enjoy the road over the next 30 years are the ones who pay for the road over the next 30 years. That's what that is. Roads last year, so we get like 240,000, 260,000, something like that in Chapter 90, which is the state formulaic funding for roads. Last year, the town funded an additional $250,000 in road construction through a land sale. So this is requesting to use free cash to again augment those Chapter 90 funds to continue to invest in town infrastructure, because I think the Select Board's really sensitive, and rightly so, to folks who say, why are we doing Project X when our roads need repair? Why are we doing Y when our roads need repair? I think the town can walk and chew gum at the same time. So this is $550,000 from free cash right now to go towards road repair and improvement. And this would be, I don't have a specific thing right here, but we did a pavement management study in, I think, summer of 23, published in fall of 23, something like that. So this money would be used to kind of accelerate that and go through the priority roads identified within the pavement management study.
I don't have a problem with the money. But it's the means and methods. What's this aluminum versus concrete? It's gonna cost what it's gonna cost. It's expensive to do road work. If anybody's gone by there and looked at it, I'm in the business, I looked at it and I go, oh yeah, that's a problem. But again, on the same thought process of, are we gonna patch an old?
So all of this detail was highlighted in Jeremy's memo in great detail.
Right, so again, what decision was made? What are you gonna go with?
Jeremy's recommendation. Go for it.
Yeah, so the design costs aren't reliant on a three-sided box. So we kind of eliminated the four-sided box culvert. It's the most expensive and it requires the reconstruction of a stream bed. So it's more complicated, doesn't last any longer, and is more expensive. So we eliminated that one. So the engineering cost differences between the three-sided box culvert and the aluminum culvert are either negligible or non-existent. So this appropriation is kind of agnostic towards that. Select, I don't know that select board actually needs to vote kind of one way or the other. They would vote to approve the contract, which includes one or the other. But they have indicated their mild preference for the three-sided box culvert, but we haven't had a prolonged discussion between the two. Since I wrote this memo, folks have said that makes sense to me, but we haven't had a vote from select board.
In the memo, it highlighted the decision or the desire for the three-sided aluminum culvert due to the improved strength and the longevity associated with it, especially considering, all of the heavy trucks that constantly go over that culvert.
That was the takeaway from my meeting with our town engineer, their research into aluminum three-sided, elsewhere, and then meeting with a highway surveyor, and then reading bid specs from other towns as well, in terms of what kind of guarantees they were getting one way or the other. So the positive referral in that memo is mine, not the select board's.
Right. So if your experience weighs in here and you have an opinion about aluminum versus concrete, the longevity and
Concrete.
So you may want to weigh in on those decisions, but
Concrete. That's all I can say. Like I said, I don't think I can make the meeting tomorrow night.
Yeah.
But
You want concrete.
Well, it sounds like,
I would be happier to see concrete.
it sounds like at this point in time, it's that decision isn't happening at this point in time, right, Jeremy?
It doesn't need to be. This is appropriating funds into a fund to, I'm saying fund again, but to fund the engineering contract. And then select board would kind of vote to execute the contract, and the specifics of that would say, one versus the other. Conversely, finance committee can vote to, I'm not sure the mechanics, but you can vote to recommend $300,000 for design of a three-sided box culvert to kind of hem in the select board should you want to, but that's not the way the motion is and the article is presented right now. And so I don't know how much the committee wants to weigh into the policy piece of things.
you said there wasn't a financial difference between the concrete and the aluminum, right?
In
Or
the
there was?
engineering cost, there's a roughly $500,000 difference in the construction costs, with the concrete being more expensive. The principal concern was there's a stated useful life of 75 years for the aluminum culverts, but aluminum culverts have been used for less than 75 years. So there is nothing out there that has lived through its stated guarantee. Whereas the stated useful life of concrete, we have at, the 50, 75 year, depending on the PSI and all that. But it's, we have thousands of examples of concrete box culverts, outlasting their stated useful life. So it is more expensive, but with such a important road to town, and like I said, with the heavy truck traffic, it was the takeaway of the engineer, the surveyor, and myself that $500,000 for possibly decades longer of use is a worthwhile investment.
Okay. Yeah, did I say earlier your recommendation was the aluminum?
No, my recommendation has been the three-sided box culvert the whole time.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Jeremy, just a question. Are there any other culvert areas in town that are of concern or of immediate concern, like Providence, that
Yep. Absolutely. And right now we're engaged with Ty and Bond, the same engineering firm that's doing this. to do a culvert inventory. We're getting grant funds, or we've applied for grant funds in the like $200,000 range with something like a $60,000 local match. Don't hold me to the specifics, but it's in that ballpark. For Ty and Bond to go out, inventory all of our culverts, do an assessment of their perceived useful life, and then similar to the pavement management study, give us a list of these are the ones you should replace, yesterday, and these are the ones that you should plan on replacing in the next decade, and so to speak.
Great to hear that.
We'll fix it and we'll never have another year like we did last year. Which is what we want, yeah.
I'll take it.
So there may be some where we come to you or come to town meeting and say, this particular culvert, aluminum works great. It's, it sees 100 cars a day and no heavy truck traffic. And, there's an easy cut through around the side if it fails or something. We don't need to spend the extra money on the concrete. But, like I said, all those complicating factors before is why we said the concrete there. This is a few items for fire and highway. Again, we can split these out if that's how select board wants to do it. Fire turnout gear and fire hose replacement. Chief Bangmo will be there to talk about both of them. Fire hose replacement would replace about 10,000 feet worth of hose in the fire department. And the hose would be good for a decade. We wouldn't have to invest in that at all for a decade longer. We kind of have, I believe we have differing lifespans right now, and different, I don't know if it's different standards. I don't want to put words in the chief's mouth. He can talk a little bit more about it, but it standardizes this. It's the only investment we have to make in hoses for a decade, and we're done. Fire turnout gear. Again, Chief can talk a little bit more about the specifics here, but what turnout gear is the exterior gear the firefighters wear that then once they respond, they need to put it through a gear extractor and have it be washed and ready for use right now. So out of our 25 firefighters, 6 of them currently have 2 sets of turnout gear. And so this would be an initial investment into getting another 6 sets of gear. So folks have a second set. But we, and that allows them to respond while, if there's 2 events within an afternoon that require turnout gear, right now there's a chance that folks wouldn't have the correct gear or would have to reuse gear without proper cleaning. I'm not sure of the policies and procedures of the fire department. What the chief and I have talked about, and what tactical working group and I have talked about, is getting this as part of the annual operating budget. This is something that needs to be replaced constantly anyway. The turnout gear has a useful life of 10 years and needs to be replaced regardless of how many times it's been used. So this kind of like cruiser replacement should be in the fire department's annual budget. So we're gonna work there. We're not gonna get it all there in the same year. It may be only 1 or 2 sets, and then we'll work our way up. But since the funds are available now, kind of the same as the cruiser, it kind of accelerates that and it puts us in a better spot operationally. But we know it needs to be part of our recurring expense budget each year.
I thought we just approved new gear.
Yeah, you're going to continue to approve it. Like I said, because it expires and because we're trying to work to get everyone a second set of gear, this is going to be a pretty frequent expenditure of the town.
Right, but I didn't. Okay. I thought we approved it as part of the fire department's budget.
I don't remember.
Okay. I'll ask the question tomorrow.
Yeah.
The highway storage facility, this is, as opposed to the turnout gear, this is a real one-time expenditure. If you've been to the highway department, they've got a old tractor trailer box, like Connex looking box, that stores all of their kind of emergency road cones, their sign storage, things like that, their snow fence, their barrels and whatnot. Doesn't have a door, has a partially rotting floor, doesn't have climate control, doesn't have electricity, doesn't have anything. So when they're responding to something, as John says, the middle of the night, but if they're responding to something at 4 p.m. in December, right, it's difficult for them to function in there. So what this is asking for is a very simple pole barn with electricity. And then we have a couple quotes that came in under this. I always add a contingency for any project that involves site work. So that's what this ask is. And then this would really just be a storage facility with a door and a light for emergency materials, and replace the very outdated.
What's the present square footage of what they're looking to replace?
It's roughly the size of a tractor. It is, I think it is the former tractor trailer box. So I don't
Okay.
know the square footage, but
And what's- okay, so basically it's a 40-foot trailer. Maybe a 60-foot trailer, I haven't seen it, but 8 foot wide, 40 feet long, 7.5 feet tall. What kind of a building are they looking for? What's the square footage of the building to replace it, if they're only looking to house what they have in there?
I'm trying to look up the specifics for you right now. Let's see.
Another question, maybe you could answer this, Mike. I know as part of the senior center project, they're talking about reusing the existing senior center for other departments, right? And I know one of them mentioned was parks, and I thought another one mentioned was highway. Am I incorrect on that or no?
Yes, it only makes sense that parks and highway should be together, so to speak.
Right.
The highway line's right there. That present building that, for the senior center, is right next to it.
Right.
It would be a perfect little, cut a few bushes down and whatnot, it'd become a complex,
Right.
is what it should be.
And it would be used as office space,
I'm not sure,
or would it be used for storage?
that's up
So
to
there's-
the park department and the highway department and the board of selectmen.
Okay.
There's money or allocated through ARPA funds for what's called adaptive reuse of the senior center. So it was not everything you said is kind of the prevailing wisdom on it, but there hasn't been a decision made, right? We want to use this study to do so, but it would be used for parks department. The garage is a little bit bigger. It could be used for parks department, vehicle and equipment storage, and then office space or a meeting or even break room space for highway and the parks department. Right now, the highway surveyor, who is out in the field and is a working supervisor like everybody else in town, but is also, a department head and a desk job in some capacity, currently shares a physical space with the administrative assistant. So, I'm trying to have a meeting like this with him and his administrative assistant. The department's administrative assistant is next to him doing her job, and it's super disruptive to both parties. There's not a great separate working space. So the idea would be to provide that kind of professional working space to either highway or somebody else in parks as well, along with the equipment and vehicle storage. And like Mike said, the proximity to highway makes it really easy to imagine that.
Right, make it a complex. But again, getting back to what size building are they looking to, what, for $60,000?
Yeah, I have that somewhere, not at my fingertips, so I'll make sure I have that tomorrow. It's on my notes here for you.
Because if it's only a tractor trailer body with stuff inside that they're looking to make a home for, you can buy Connex boxes.
Yeah, they're looking
You can buy
for
quite a few of them for $60,000.
Yeah.
they're looking for an upgrade from Connex
What's the
boxes.
real reason for this building?
Sounds like what, lighting and,
So you can install light and electricity in a car.
I was just gonna say the
Go on
lighting,
down to my job site in Franklin, I'll show you how
Yeah.
easy it can be done.
okay.
So I think bringing a deeper detailed proposal on the $60,000, I was going to add on to this after you got your question answered is, could we dual purpose this highway and parks department storage facility for $60,000? Yeah. So.
So like I say,
Alright.
that's the real reason for that building.
Put the street sweeper in.
don't go there.
Jeremy's out of the office tonight.
It's gotta live somewhere. You don't want to sit outside.
Well, you can buy a top pretty cheap.
Jack has been very quiet tonight. Any feedback, Jack? Are you good?
I'm taking it all in, gents. There you are, Mike Colin. Jeremy's doing an outstanding job here explaining this. So
Yeah.
And I still have new guy leeway, so that's good.
Yeah.
Goes off at 10 o'clock.
So these are these are proposed increases to fiscal 25 general fund budget. So these would, none of those things would increase the fiscal 25 budget. These would increase the fiscal 25 budget. They are appropriations from free cash. So finance committee reserves, I believe the number is at like 20,000 right now. I had a select board member say with this level of free cash, they would expect to see FinCom reserves come out at a level between 50 and 60,000 or around the $50,000. Forget if you said 50 or 60. What I like about adding to FinCom reserves is that it requires, even if you put a ton of money in there, it requires a vote of both this committee and the select board to take out of it. And if you don't use it, it just falls back to free cash at the end of the next fiscal year. So the way I view FinCom reserves is with kind of there's a lot of oversight to it. But it allows a lot of flexibility at the end of the year should either some emergency happen or we have the opportunity to invest in something that we didn't think we would be able to before. Getting it into the appropriation just requires a simple vote of, not a simple vote, it's two committees, but requires a simple majority from two committees to be able to transfer from there. It doesn't require another appropriation. And like I said, if we don't use it, it just falls back to the free cash. So it would require this committee to do anything else with it.
Jeremy, our previous interim TA made a recommendation that FinCom reserve should be in the 75K range, just based off of experience and past history in other municipalities. I guess looking for your guidance on what an appropriate level is. Like, do you think this is still low for FinCom reserves based off of what you've learned about Mendon so far? Do you think it's just right?
I'm doing a quick percentage. Hold on.
I was thinking 300, what's that for the sweep of 335,000, is that what it was?
Yeah, so just looking at previous communities and what their equivalent to FinCom reserves is, yeah, 75,000 would be closer. This gets us to 61,000. So I'm
not making a case to make anything different. I'm just looking for your opinion on other data points that
what a healthy level is. Yeah. So I think kind of similar to stabilization, where we could have a policy to say it is the policy of the town to, aim for between this and this. And, we don't have adopted financial policies, or at least any within a reasonable history. So if you watch the select board's 4.5-hour Saturday retreat in September, I committed to getting a draft of financial policies to the select board within calendar year 2024 for their review and eventual adoption. So I think having a level that says FinCom reserves and, shall be, in this band of percentages of general fund expenditures. I haven't done any kind of analytical dive on what I think that should be or what other communities have. But I think it's a great question. And because you should think of it in percentages and not dollar values, that means you have to increase it every year as your budget increases every year, and you don't have to then go change policy to do that. But I like that suggestion. The second one came out of another select board question about what we do for building maintenance. So we've got a central building maintenance account that's got about $30,000 in it. That can get eaten up really quickly with like the senior center this year needed a $7,000 lift and a $2,000 refrigerator or something in that magnitude. We're able to allocate ARPA funds to be able to cover that. But kind of stuff that doesn't rise to the level of a capital improvement plan, and that is just kind of a replacement of needed equipment, kind of comes up from time to time. So this is kind of bolstering that account. So my plan is to have a little bit deeper of a report on what we have historically spent on that. Our financial reporting software is one that I've never used before, so it's a little clunky and not one I am familiar with. So I'll make sure I dive into that a little bit better for tomorrow's meeting. Police fire liability insurance. So this is what I said was one of those essentially non-negotiable items. So in fiscal 24, we budgeted a number in for this expenditure, and it came in quite a bit higher. And so what we did was we short paid the invoice and said to the vendor, we're going to wait for an appropriation and we'll pay the rest of the invoice when we get the appropriation. And then this year we budgeted slightly higher, but not nearly enough. And I asked, without that knowledge, I asked the vendor, can we short pay this and wait for an appropriation and promise to budget more next year? And he said, no, because that's what you did last year. So we paid it out of a select board account, which it doesn't really belong in. So what this appropriation does is puts the 27,521, which we were short in the budget, into the correct account, and then we'll do an accounting journal entry and move the expense off of the incorrect account and put it back onto where that account should be. And then this insurance account will then be zeroed out. So this is a bill that's already been paid. It was required to be paid months before it actually was. It's a fiscal 25 expenditure, so we didn't need a prior year bill sort of thing. But again, this falls a lot to the transition and who's responsible as the risk manager for the town, which is me, but I didn't see the bill until September.
And where is this budgeted? Is it budgeted under the police and fire department budgets, or is it a separate?
It's a singleton way to, it's like the third or fourth last department. It's essentially only this. I forget it's like 699 or something as the department. It's way towards the end of the budget. So if you go and look, it'll be pretty apparent. We budgeted $75,000 and the bill was 102,000 and change.
And are we using a broker for the purchase of this insurance?
We use Maya, the Massachusetts Intermunicipal Insurance Agency. It's a subset of the MMA, the Massachusetts Municipal Association. And it's how we procure our liability insurance and our like health, dental, vision insurance. They are the insurance provider to over 300 different municipal and regional entities in Massachusetts. They're the largest player in the space, and they're backed up by Chubb. So we've been with them for as long as kind of anybody can remember, and they're some of the most competitive rates and consistently the most competitive rates for small municipalities.
Thank you.
Emergency management. This was something that was inserted into the fiscal 25 budget kind of without a lot of deliberation and then asked to be removed. But the select board is having an executive session after their meeting tomorrow, or at the conclusion of their meeting tomorrow, which I imagine you would be invited to attend to discuss should you want to. This is stipends for folks who run emergency management for the town above and beyond what their job description says for their day-to-day. So I have a TBD level. The select board has a number in mind, but without, having a vote in executive session about a level, I didn't put it in here. Meetings and dues on the select board. There's some professional development that I have taken part in and want to take part in, that I want our executive assistant to take part in, that I want to make sure everyone gets to go, select board members and myself and some department heads who are interested get to go to the annual conference for Massachusetts Municipal Association. And the meetings and dues line kind of has been one of those things where it's been level funded rather than level service. So this kind of gets us to a place where we can continue to invest in professional development. What I like about it being in the select board is that if, the conservation agent wants to go to a $60 thing that they don't have the budget there, select board can, because of its central nature, can approve and pay for that sort of thing. So it's not just myself and select board. We use it for as like a kind of a central training account. And then, so I don't want to get too into these individual departments because of, like I said before, I'm going to change how I allocated the reserve for transfer. So this is what we need to fund the collective bargaining agreements in these departments. I say down here, the following departments will receive a salary transfer from the already appropriated reserve for negotiation. So this is what we need. And sorry, it splits here. So there's $110,000 in the reserve for transfer. So that's what we're asking for there in the reserve for negotiation. And then this, let me do 17, 20, 32, 37,000 or change, whatever it is here, in addition to that 110,000. So like I said, I'm going to break that out so it's even across departments. so you can see the cost of what the additional 2% as opposed to the originally budgeted reserve for negotiation 2% is. I will say the select board will be a little bit different because you didn't have a person in my position to budget for, and you didn't have a person in the executive assistant position to budget for. So my salary this year is not dependent upon what, the previous TAs was in fiscal 23. There's not really a connect between the two. So that's not going to be a clear percentage. And you can see here the town clerk, that's what I said, that additional 2% outside, but that'll be more clear. Article 18, recreation field technical assistance. So the select board stood up a commission after much input and discussion about how we can better develop recreational fields, how we can better serve the communities that use recreational fields, and how we can do it kind of collaboratively. Upton has a commission. They stood up just the same as this. The school has a commission. So this would work kind of collaboratively region-wise to make sure, if Upton puts in 9 soccer fields, we don't want to then put in 9 soccer fields, sort of thing. This is technical assistance to get that, to bring some expertise into it, professional expertise. I will say, after discussions with some folks just this afternoon, I think that number is too low. So that's going to be a discussion at select board tomorrow, and hopefully we can provide some rationale and some comps on that.
So this is like consultants or?
Yeah, exactly. And senior center redesign costs, this is again one of the non-negotiables, in that at the end of one of the fiscal year-end transfers, if you all recall, I started on a Monday, then we had a Friday meeting to do fiscal year-end transfers. One of the things on that Friday was $10,000 for senior center redesign costs. So that was the architect saying, I'm going to scale down the project from the ballot measure that failed in the spring and bring it back in the fall. That was a fiscal 24 appropriation. And then the services, when I got the first invoice, the services didn't start until July. So we can't use fiscal 24 general fund appropriations to pay services that start in July, fiscal 25. So that $10,000 that was transferred at the end of fiscal 24 just fell right through to free cash. It wasn't able to be used. And so we actually executed a contract that was $8,500, not $10,000. So what this is asking is saying that $10,000 that fell through to free cash, now please appropriate it into an article, a warrant article fund, to be able to pay for these services, of which they've already been rendered, and we just didn't have the funding in place to pay for them.
So that money came out of FinCom reserve, right?
Yep.
And ended up not being spent.
Because it was approved on July 8th. So, or whatever, July 12th, whatever that Friday was. And the contractor didn't start working. The service period for his first invoice wasn't until July. So the money was approved to move a fiscal 24 appropriation. So in order to use that money, the services would have had to have been rendered by June 30th. And the services weren't rendered till July. So I should have caught that at the time. I had assumed this was an additional appropriation for stuff that was already happening, because it's a fiscal year appropriation. It needs to happen by June 30th. So that money was left entirely unspent because I rejected the payable.
So the FinCom reserve money dropped into free cash.
Yeah,
but
and now it's
But that wasn't indicated in where the free cash came from earlier in the presentation, right?
Yeah, because there was $914,000 or $940,000. So things that were below the kind of $40,000 in under expended. I didn't list up there, and you wouldn't see that in FinCom reserves anyway, because it's a reserve account, so you can't expend from a reserve account. So it was actually transferred into a Council on Aging account, and then it was unspent from there. So it wouldn't actually have shown up in FinCom reserves. It would have shown up over in the COA.
Okay.
But your rationale is correct in that it went from FinCom reserves to COA, didn't get funded, or didn't get expended, so it fell through to free cash. And now I'm just saying, can we take that same money, which you already approved once for this same exact use, and put it to where it should be to pay for services that have already been rendered?
Got it.
This one, the Board of Health. So there were two conflicting approved articles at annual town meeting in May. One raised and appropriated $681,000 on local receipts for solid waste revenue, and then the associated expenditures on the general fund too. But then at the same time, it created a enterprise fund and with a budget of $681,000 and appropriated into there the same local receipts and gave it an expenditure budget of the same amount to be able to run the municipal solid waste program. So we've accounted for the same revenue twice and it needs to be fixed. So we're already halfway through the fiscal year. So rather than create kind of an accounting mess, my recommendation to the Board of Health, which they agreed, was to keep the program on the general fund for the conclusion of fiscal 2025. And then in fiscal 2026, have that be year one of the enterprise fund. And so what we would need here, and this is language I got from town council earlier today, would be to rescind the appropriation into the enterprise fund. So essentially make it a zero expenditure, zero revenue fund for fiscal 2025. And then do it correctly at annual town meeting coming up to only account for the revenue in one place.
Didn't the town council look at this the last time we did this? Like, didn't they review?
Presumably.
Didn't they review the wording of how this was set up and approve it before we voted on it?
So individually, each of the things are legal and approved as to form. It's their interaction with each other that doesn't work. You can do one or the other. Neither of them are wrong. You just can't do them both together. And so
you would have thought that they would have caught that. Is that their job to catch that or no? Like, whose job? Where did this like fall down?
I mean, it shouldn't have been presented, but I think this committee recommended both.
Yeah, I mean, it went through us, it went through the select board, it went through legal, it went through everybody. So.
Right, I'm not looking to kind of like point the finger. I just want to understand, like, so it doesn't happen again, where we do something like this and, it's a big number and now we have to kind of resend it because it wasn't vetted. The wording wasn't properly vetted, right?
Well, I wouldn't say that, because the wording was fine and legal and to form and did what it intended to do individually. It's that it used the same money twice. So in the vacuum, they're both fine. It's in relation that they're not. So, I mean, the check and balance is that, I read the warrant and I said, this doesn't make sense. And now we're fixing it.
Okay. So the check and balance probably should have been last year, someone reviewing it to make sure that we weren't double kind of allocating or something, right?
Yeah, it's a new concept. We don't have enterprise funds. We have revolving funds. Water's an enterprise fund. We haven't stood up an enterprise fund in a while. So it's new and folks weren't probably used to the language, and because the 681 was kind of buried in a local receipt number, it probably didn't jump out to folks that you had the 681 in both places. But when we go to enter the town meeting votes into what's called, DLS's gateway, into like our tax recap sheet, the town clerk says, hey, I have this number twice. And then she brought it to my attention. And I said, hey, I circled this on my copy of the warrant. And I said, I don't understand what's going on here. So then we were able to unwind it. I've met with Board of Health twice about it now. We have a plan for how to do it for fiscal 26. We also have a plan on how to assess indirect costs to the fund in a way that gives them kind of, doesn't cut their legs out from underneath them. The town has already corrected how we charge municipal accounts. It's not on the ratepayer; it's on the taxpayer now, which is how it should be. So this is a $0 impact, but cleaning up a financial related matter.
And my question is purely just around kind of process, and just so we don't have to do this again kind of thing. And I assume the next time we set one of these up, we'll make sure that that's not the case, right?
I know it's 10:20, but if I could say a short story, I once incorrectly tried to balance a budget when I was in Attleboro. I forgot to add in last year's new growth into my levy. So with about 2 weeks to go before I presented my budget, our city auditor said your revenues are off by $900,000, and I almost passed out. And she's like, no, she's like, don't worry, you have $900,000 more than you think you'd have. And so I had to go and redo a lot of work. It was some really long nights. So I say that story to say I'll make 1,000 more mistakes in my municipal career. I'm never going to make that mistake again. Like that mistake will never happen again. So this is the kind of thing where it seems like so silly and we have to revisit something. And it's like I've spent a couple minutes explaining something which has like a literal $0 impact. We'll be sure not to do this mistake again, is my point.
You weren't accidentally charging people assuming.
No, I know.
Well, this is my question. We weren't accidentally charging the town assuming we needed to spend essentially almost $1.4 million, right?
No, the enterprise fund has no activity in it. Tax bills have gone out as anticipated, trash bills, and then that money has been deposited into the revenue line on the general fund, as has typically happened. It's functioning exactly the same in fiscal 25 as it was in fiscal 24. The intent was for it to function differently in 25, is to have this enterprise fund, but we kind of whiffed. So in fiscal 26, we'll get this up and started and make sure that we don't account for these revenues on the general fund or the expenditures on the general fund.
Sounds good.
And if the committee remembers, the point behind an enterprise fund is if the program turns a profit, if they say, they collect $1,000 more than they spend or $10,000 more than they spend, what happens right now is that's ratepayer money that then goes into free cash and is used for everything we've talked about. Whereas, while every ratepayer is a taxpayer, not every taxpayer is a ratepayer. So the ratepayer money should stay with the program. So having an enterprise fund, that money, that profit would stay as a retained earning within the enterprise fund. And then the Board of Health can choose to use that for some sort of capital expenditure if we need like a pickup truck to go around and do inspections or whatever, or can use it to offset rate increases for the next fiscal year and say, we're going to use some of the over-collected stuff to give you a break next year. Whereas that can't happen right now because it all gets washed together with every other bit of revenue. Article 20, we own Clough School. Schools want to put in a charger and N-Grid needs an easement. So I'm getting some language from the schools on that. So I didn't want to steal Mike's thunder about annual town meeting being at the same time every year, but the town clerk has asked for an article to change the rigidness of annual town meeting being the first Friday in May. So I worked with her on the language after her request in theory, and this is the language to change general bylaw chapter 2 section 1 to make it within the first 2 weeks of May. So it's not financial in nature, but I know you all would be interested anyway. And that's the warrant.
So I know we're late, so I won't beat this. So I promise. So other than the 500 grand that we put into stabilization, all the other free cash money we're planning on spending?
No, there's roughly $400,000 that's left unspent. So that's more than we've had a number of fiscal years to start. So there's something like $397,000 left unspent after all of that.
Yeah, remaining in free cash.
Correct. And if it doesn't get appropriated at annual town meeting or another special town meeting, folks can call them at kind of any point, then it would be added to our free cash next year in the same way that unspent $243,000 was from last year to this year.
Correct. So the 500 plus 847 plus the 40 that's going into FinCom reserves. So we got almost 900 of the 2.4.
So we're spending 60 or 70% of the money.
Yeah.
And there was no discussion of having it revert back to the taxpayers, right?
Say that again, sorry.
There was no discussion about it having it revert back to the taxpayers, right?
We can't issue checks to taxpayers now.
Just ask the question.
I can't get a yes if you don't ask,
I
right?
think the answer would always be, the tax increase won't be quite as much.
I'm not going to
We're
commit.
2.5%, and we know that.
I'm not going to commit to that either about taxing below the levy.
Okay.
Yeah, so 16% of free cash would remain. And that includes, like you said, 500,000 into stabilization, 100,000 into capital stabilization, 50,000 into OPEB trust, which are, savings accounts, 40,000 into FinCom reserves.
Okay, so more than that, yeah.
So more than 16% if you add the other things. Am I following that?
Yeah, so it depends on what you want to add, because reasonably you're going to spend some of the FinCom reserve. So if you add in the 500,000 in stabilization, the 100,000 in capital stabilization, which I think would just be like the most conservative way to do it. Oops. Sorry, I'm not used to little keyboard. And it's to say the savings, there would be not. So if you include what's in the stabilizations as being saved and unspent, 40% of free cash remains unspent. You can always go into annual town meeting and appropriate out of stabilization into something you want to do.
Okay, thank you. Jeremy, this was like incredibly useful. I know we went really late. I appreciate the detail, and I appreciate you allowing us to ask you questions and poke and prod a little bit.
Yeah, certainly.
As we said before, we're doing this for, all the taxpayers in the town to be able to ask these questions and raise this in a public forum for folks.
Yeah, I said it before. I appreciate the kind words, and I appreciate what this group is doing. I said it not to be like too earnest before, but every municipality, at least in Massachusetts, I can't talk for others, but benefits from a large swath of volunteers who have their neighbors, friends and neighbors' interest in mind. So I'm always happy to talk through stuff like this, where literally everything we do, unless it's collective, unless it's a contract or negotiation or something, everything we do is free and open to folks to know about and examine and question. So I'm always happy to do stuff like this.
All right. Great. Well, it was a pleasure meeting you.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
All right, anything else for Jeremy?
Have a good night.
Thank you, thanks a
All
lot.
right, thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks, and I'll try to work on these, Ben. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy.
I'll second Mike's motion if no one did.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor?
Yeah.
Ron Swider, aye.
Gregor, aye.
Aye.
See you, Jeremy.
Billy had an eye.
Good night,
Good
Jim.
back.
Good night.
See you, good night.
See you, Jack.
Big fun with this kid.
He's good, yeah.
Oh, boy.